Commander Hung Jiang? It was an unfamiliar name, but considering that the figure was looking right at him, it was obvious that the other party was addressing him. So, the name of the commander that he was disguised as was Hung Jiang. It was not a bad name. Taking a closer look at the figure before him, he saw that the other party was wearing a helmet identical to his. His aura felt dense and expansive. He was actually a great sage for Dan's sempiternal realm cultivator too. Weren't there only 7 great sages in this encampment? Where did this one pop out from? The seal. Zhang Xian's heart skipped a beat as realization struck him. If he was not mistaken, the other party was the backup coming from beyond the breached seal. Of all the times, the other party just had to arrive before he made a move. Was this not too much of a coincidence? However, even if the other party was a sempiternal realm cultivator, it would not be easy for him to see through his disguise. With such a thought in mind, Zhang Xian did not panic in the least. Instead, his eyebrows shot up coldly as he remarked, "Am I obligated to report my actions to you?" "You." Hearing those words, the black-armored otherworldly demon harumphed coldly. Flinging his hand back coldly, he took out a golden edict and said, "Under the orders of Sovereign Chen Yong, you are to halt your attack and retreat immediately." Retreat immediately? Zhang Xian was slightly taken aback. The Sovereign Chen Yong, whom the other party spoke of, was likely to be one of the highest-ranked otherworldly demon emperors. But this did not make any sense at all. After all of the sacrifices made to breach the spatial seal, he was being ordered to retreat? That's right. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and reorganize your army to retreat. The black-armored otherworldly demon berated as he tossed the golden edict over. Zhang Xian caught the golden edict and read through it. The words were written in the language of the otherworldly demonic tribe, and it was indeed a command for his army to retreat. This, Zhang Xian pondered for a moment as he placed the edict into his storage ring. Before that, I have something to show you. The eyebrows of the black-armored otherworldly demon shot up. I have found another use for the artifacts of the human seers. Once activated, it wields incomparable prowess, such that even half-ancient sages will be destroyed in an instant. There's no better tool than this to deal with those humans. Zhang Xian spoke with unwavering confidence. Even half-ancient sages will be destroyed in an instant. The black-armored otherworldly demon questioned with a skeptical tone. Ordinary soldiers might not have been able to recognize these mirrors, but he did. They were the artifacts of the human seers, and they could only be used to conceal one's aura. Furthermore, they had to be arranged in a specific position in order to do so. There was no way that these mirrors could wield the prowess to kill a half-ancient sage cultivator. If you don't believe my words, why don't you can give it a try yourself? After that, I'll get my soldiers to retreat. Zhang Xian nodded earnestly. Very well. Let me see what in the world are you up to. The black-armored otherworldly demon nodded doubtfully. He was there to relay the orders, and as long as the other party was willing to abide by the commands, he did not mind playing along with him. If there was truly an extraordinary use for the mirrors, that would be even for the better. Given that there were so many otherworldly demon soldiers around, and the fact that the person that he was facing was a commander, it was unlikely that the other party would dare pull anything on him. It's very simple. Pick any one of these mirrors and place your hand on it. Zhang Xian instructed affirmatively. The black-armored otherworldly demon gazed into Zhang Xian's eyes for a while, and seeing that the other party was not messing with him, he eventually nodded in agreement. He walked up to one of the mirrors and placed his hand on it. It was not that he was a fool. It was just that he could not possibly have imagined that the person before him was not Hung Jiang, but someone else. Besides, seers were known not to be a battle-oriented occupation. Their artifacts mainly dealt with divination and anti-divination means. Even if it was a trap, he was confident that he would be able to deal with it with his strength. Since everyone is ready, let's begin. Seeing that this newly arrived expert had placed his hand on the mirror as well, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. But just as he was about to activate the Library of Heaven's path on the mirror, he heard the sharp whistle of a gale sounding above. Another figure was flying over. Hung Jiang, receive your orders. Sovereign Chen Ling has decreed that you shall launch an attack this instant. While in the air, The figure had already unrolled a golden edict and issued the order. It was another sempiternal realm cultivator. This, Zhang Xian blinked blankly. It was just a moment that he received an order to retreat, and all of a sudden, he received another order to launch an assault right away. Are you all toying with me? Wait a moment. The person who issued the order to retreat seemed to be Sovereign Chen Yong, whereas the person asking me to attack is Sovereign Chen Ling. Their names sound similar, but they aren't the same person. Could there be some discord among the sovereigns? If the sovereigns were close with one another, there was no way that they would issue such contradicting orders. If there was truly disharmony among the sovereigns, this could spell an opportunity for him. Mao Wu, what do you mean by this? Sovereign Chen Yong has already ordered for the troops here to retreat. The black-armored otherworldly demon remarked with an awful look on his face. It was just a moment after he had issued his order, when Mao Wu came here with a contradicting order. This was blatant disrespect toward him and Sovereign Chen Yong. I don't mean anything at all. If you were a bit smarter, it should be apparent to you that I'm just following orders. Heng Jiang, what are waiting for? Hurry up and receive the edict. The otherworldly demon named Mao Wu replied coldly, as he tossed the golden edict over toward Zhang Xian. Catching the edict, Zhang Xian swiftly read through its contents. Written in the language of the otherworldly demons as well, the edict contained a command for him to launch an attack against the Zhang clan right away. A look of dilemma surfaced on Zhang Xian's face as he stared the edict before him. Seeing the conflicted look on Zhang Xian's face, the black-armored otherworldly demon bellowed furiously. Heng Jiang, ignore that fellow's words and get your men to retreat. As the direct subordinate of the spirit god, Sovereign Chen Yong is the highest otherworldly demon emperor of our otherworldly demon tribe. Unless you want to be beheaded, you should know what you must do. Sovereign Chen Yong might be the highest otherworldly demon emperor, but times are different now. The Temple of Confucius is on the verge of opening, and after all the effort we have put into breaking open the spatial seal, how can we retreat like this? Think of the men who have sacrificed themselves for this cause. Mao Wu roared vehemently. Sovereign Chen Yong's words are the very words of the spirit god. Do you intend to oppose the will of the spirit god? I dare not oppose the will of the spirit god, but this matter is of the utmost importance to our otherworldly demonic tribe. There's something amiss about the order issued by Sovereign Chen Yong, so I would rather listen to Sovereign Chen Ling's words. Find authorized novels in WebNovel Faster Updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. The two envoys began bickering with one another. All right. There's no need to bicker over this matter. Seeing that the two otherworldly demons were on the verge of clashing with one another, Zhang Xian stepped forward and mediated the situation. If you may listen to my humble words, why don't we not rush into executing the orders of Sovereign Chen Yong and Sovereign Chen Ling for the moment? Regardless of whose command it is, the wills of the sovereigns are not something that we can simply disregard. Why don't we do this instead? I won't withdraw my soldiers, but I won't rush into an attack either. Let's clarify the situation before coming to a judgment. For the time being, why don't I show you too the recent research breakthrough I have made? Research breakthrough? Mao Wu frowned doubtfully. Indeed, I have found a way to utilize the artifacts of the human seers that produces devastating power that is sufficient to destroy even an entire city. Brother Mao Wu, if you are interested, why don't you place your hand on one of the mirrors, just like what my soldiers are doing? I'll show you the results of my research, Zhang Xian said with a smile. You want me to touch the mirror? Mao Wu asked with a doubtful frown. He turned his gaze to the otherworldly demon soldiers around him, and only at that moment did he realize that they were holding hands tightly together with the person at the forefront of the file touching the mirror. Even the black-armored otherworldly demon was standing before a mirror with his hand resting lightly on its surface. Indeed, I believe that this could be a revolutionary discovery. If we could use this discovery to eradicate the humans once and for all, we'll become heroes of the otherworldly demonic tribe. The sovereigns will surely reward us handsomely for our immense contribution. Zhang Xian spoke with his voice quivering in excitement. Very well then. Seeing that everyone was already in position, Mao Wu swiftly nodded in agreement. He walked up to a mirror and placed his hand on it. Great. Is everyone ready? Put on a bright smile, all right? 3, 2, 1. Zhang Xian threw his hands in the air and exclaimed, Cheese! Kacha! 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 In an instant, Mao Wu, the black-armored otherworldly demon, and all of the soldiers were assaulted by a barrage of lightning bolts. Their hair rose into the air, and white smoke drifted from their bodies. Not expecting the mirror to actually be able to summon lightning bolts, the faces of Mao Wu and the black-armored otherworldly demon were ravaged with frenzy. The both of them released a resounding roar at the same time. The otherworldly demon soldiers were also devastated by the lightning bolts. It was just a short instant, but they had already sustained severe internal injuries. They had abided by the commander's orders expecting something good, but who would have thought that this would happen instead? They wanted to release their hands, but the electrocution from the lightning bolts had affected their nerves, not allowing them to move as they liked. To make matters worse, they had held hands tightly together in order to prevent their auras from leaking out. At the forefront of the group, Commander Heng Jiang waved his hand apologetically and said, My bad, my bad. I don't think I operated the artifact properly. Continue holding your hands firmly on the mirrors, all right? I guarantee that it'll be different this time around. But before he could even finish his words, more streaks of lightning had already descended from the sky. Kacha! Kacha! It was as if the Armageddon had arrived. The crackling of the lightning simply echoed ceaselessly in the air. All of the otherworldly demon soldiers were frenzied. It's indeed different this time around. But what the heck? The lightning is even more fearsome than before. My gosh! Are you intending to send us to our graves? The otherworldly demon soldiers tried their hardest to retract their hands from one another, but their bodies were far too paralyzed for them to be able to do anything other than spasm. Pooh. 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 Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. One after another, white foam dribbled from the corner of their mouths as their consciousness gradually faded away. Even as they gradually came to their last breath, they could not believe that they would die from a mistake by their commander. To actually do in his own men as well. How in the world did this fellow manage to become a commander? Most of these soldiers were only at St. 3 Dan and St. 4 Dan. They had not even gone through their first leaving aperture ordeal yet. How could they possibly survive such a vicious onslaught of lightning bolts? All it took was a couple of bolts for nearly all of them to be wiped out. Even Mao Wu and the black-armored otherworldly demon were spasming from being electrocuted. Typically speaking, as sempiternal realm cultivators, they should have been able to overcome lightning bolts of such scale with ease. However, the very fact that the mirrors were mere seer artifacts made them lower their guard. They had not put up any defensive measures at all, and the lightning bolts had come too quickly for them to put up anything. As a result, while the barrage of lightning bolts was not enough to claim their lives, it blurred their consciousness and rendered them powerless. Phew, it seems like everything worked out well. Seeing that the 10,000 or so otherworldly demon soldiers had been completely annihilated by the lightning bolts, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. As tools used against the heavens, seer artifacts were susceptible to heavenly retribution. All Zhang Xian had to do was activate his library of Heaven's Path, and the heavens would do their job. He had come up with this plan on the spur of the moment, and to be honest, he had thought that it was a rather ridiculous plan. Yet, who could have thought that he would actually be able to pull it off impeccably? The only imperfection in his plan was probably the sudden emergence of the two envoys, from Sovereign Chen Yong and Sovereign Chen Ling. However, it was fortunate that the two of them had not expected to fall for such an unconventional attack. While the heavenly retribution toward seer artifacts was limited in terms of prowess, its greatest advantage lay in the fact that it was instantaneous. As such, it was actually able to get to the two sempiternal realm cultivators before they could even react. Dragonbone Divine Spear, scout the area and kill any surviving soldiers around. Ding Ding Infernal Blacksaber, the two of you deal with Mao Wu. He knew that he had only succeeded because his luck was good. The other party had been caught off guard. However, Once the two sempiternal realm cultivators recovered, he would be in a terrible position. Knowing that time was not on his side, Zhang Xian immediately dashed for the black-armored otherworldly demon. He had left Mao Wu to the Golden Origin Cauldron and the Infernal Black Saber, while he dealt with the black-armored otherworldly demon single-handedly. You aren't Heng Jiang. Who are you? Seeing the huge massacre before him, there was no way that the black-armored otherworldly demon could still remain oblivious to the truth. The person before him was not Heng Jiang at all. Overwhelmed with rage, he flicked his wrist, whipped out a sword, and brandished it toward Zhang Xian. Wang. However, before his sword could even come close to Zhang Xian, he suddenly felt a will surging right into him, befuddling his mind. He nearly lost his balance and fell down due to that. Soul offense. The black-armored otherworldly demon narrowed his eyes. It was apparent that the other party was skilled at soul offense. To think that even a sempiternal realm cultivator like him would be unable to guard his mind against the other party. Voila! While the black-armored otherworldly demon was still plagued with dizziness, he suddenly saw the fake Heng Jiang appearing right before him. A powerful punch harnessing unbelievable might was already heading right for his head. Bloodline ignition. Knowing that he would lose his life if the punch really landed on him, the black-armored otherworldly demon activated his bloodline without any hesitation. In an instant, incredible power surged through his body. Bloodline ignition won't help you either. Zhang Xian scoffed coldly. With the tremendous surge of strength from the bloodline ignition, the black-armored otherworldly demon was just about to counterattack when the fellow right before him suddenly whipped out a small inkstone and pounded it down on his head. Kacha! It was the sound of a certain otherworldly demon's skull being split apart. As a sempiternal realm cultivator, his body had reached a level where it was impervious to most attacks. Even if he allowed an Aureate body realm cultivator to attack him freely, the latter might not have been able to breach his defenses. Yet, the other party was actually able to split his skull apart with just an inkstone. Just what tier was that inkstone at? Bro, where in the world did you come from? That skeleton dragon, the brick, and the demonic saber. I thought that it's already astounding that you could have 3 artifacts that are so powerful. But to think that you even have an inkstone on top of that. Pung 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 pung. This was clearly not the time for thought, as the other party continued smashing the inkstone down on his head. Gradually his consciousness drifted away. He was probably the only sempiternal realm cultivator to die such a miserable death. He was first electrocuted before being smashed to death by a puny-looking inkstone. He never would have thought that such a fate would befall him. It's indeed not so easy to use this inkstone. It isn't intended for offense after all. Zhang Xian shook his head as he returned the bloodstained inkstone to his storage ring. This was the artifact that he had obtained from Tantai Jinxing. It was one of the personal possessions of ancient sage Ziyu, and it went without saying that it was a formidable artifact. However, it was not as handy when used as a weapon. If Tantai Jinxing knew that Zhang Xian had used this invaluable treasure from his ancestor as a weapon to smash an enemy's head, he would probably lose his mind and faint on the spot. The inkstone was a family heirloom passed down from generation to generation within the Tantai clan. If one used the ink ground by the inkstone to calligraph, the golden warriors of Mentor's calligraph produced would be much more powerful. Yet that fellow actually used this inkstone as a mere bat. How in the world did such a refined tool end up being used for such a barbaric purpose? After slaying the black-armored otherworldly demon, Zhang Xian turned his head around to look at Mao Wu. The latter's head was currently pressed under the Golden Origin Cauldron's bottom, and there was a despaired look on his face. Without looking on, it was apparent that the fellow was doomed too. The fighting prowess of weapons was significantly reduced, without a skilled user to control them. However, both the Golden Origin Cauldron and the Infernal Black Saber possessed greater strength than Mao Wu, and they had moved in unison to deal with him. Furthermore, Mao Wu had yet to recover from the side effects from the electrocution, so there was no way he could be a match for him. At this moment, the Dragonbone Divine Spear had finished its cleanup and returned as well. The relentless bolts of lightning earlier had pretty much zapped the 10,000 or so otherworldly soldiers into their graves. There were very few survivors, so it did not take the Dragonbone Divine Spear to finish its job. To be honest, the Dragonbone Divine Spear was truly impressed with the means of its master. That was an army of over 10,000 otherworldly demons. Before Ancient Sage Ran Xiao made his breakthrough to Ancient Sage, he would have had to flee as far as he could from such a lineup. Yet, his master single-handedly annihilated the entire army and left not a single survivor at all. What was even more ridiculous was that he did not suffer the slightest injury in the midst of doing so. This was a feat that would go down in legends and recounted as an epic. To single-handedly clear a subterranean gallery, this was truly inconceivable. Just as the Dragonbone Divine Spear's thoughts were wandering, another gale sounded from the distance, and yet another black-armored, otherworldly demon appeared in the area. Commander Heng Jiang, receive your orders. Sovereign Chen Xing commands you to keep your army on standby. You are not to attack or retreat recklessly. As the black-armored otherworldly demon spoke, he flicked his wrist and took out a golden edict. At this moment, however, he caught sight of the countless corpses beneath, including Mao Wu, who was crushed under a brick. His eyebrows shot up in astonishment as he exclaimed, "Heng Jiang, what's going on here?" On the ground, Commander Heng Jiang scratched his head awkwardly and said, "Will you believe me if I say that they are all sleeping?" "What do you mean by sleeping? How in the world do they look like they are sleeping to you?" The black-armored otherworldly demon, who had just arrived, clutched his hair in frenzy. "Do you think I'm a fool who can't differentiate between the dead and the living? There's nothing I can do if you don't believe me." Knowing that the other party would not believe him no matter what he said, Zhang Xian waved his hand helplessly. "Get him." He had already killed 3 sempiternal realm otherworldly demons here. He did not mind adding one more to his record. Boom! The combined prowess of Zhang Xian and his 3 artifacts truly could not be underestimated. Before the black-armored otherworldly demon could get away, he was encircled and slaughtered. After absorbing the blood and souls of 4 sempiternal realm otherworldly demons, the infernal black saber had become even more demonic, making it difficult for one to look at directly. After taking all of the resources and storage rings scattered around, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Following which, he began making his way toward the spatial seal. He was not too sure what had happened at the seal, but the fact that otherworldly demons were coming one after another was a sign that it had indeed been breached. He really had to find a way to repair it as soon as possible. Otherwise, there would really be no end to them. After flying for a while, the spatial seal finally came into his sight. At the very center of the spatial seal was a massive hole. It looked as if someone had forcefully ripped it apart. There was little doubt that Mao Wu and the others had come in through here. It's fortunate that it hasn't been completely destroyed. Otherwise, there's no way I could have constructed another spatial seal of this scale. Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Even though he had comprehended the spatial quintessence of sealing, his cultivation was simply too weak. Mending it was already the limits of his ability. For him to set up a brand new spatial seal that could ward off ancient sages was clearly daydreaming. Heading up to the seal, Zhang Xian immediately got to mending it. In the midst of his work, he could not help falling into thought. The otherworldly battlefield is right on the other side. Should I go over to take a look? The otherworldly demonic tribe often sent their men over to wreak havoc, so why should he not do the same to them? Furthermore, while he had managed to resolve the crisis in this subterranean gallery for the time being, it would be naive to think that this would be the end. This was likely to just be a small proportion of the otherworldly demonic tribe's armies. The 108 subterranean galleries had all come under the simultaneous assault of the otherworldly demonic tribe, and the Master-Teacher Pavilion, the Luo clan, and the Jiang clan had been forced to head over to defend against them. If he could cause some chaos over in the otherworldly battlefield, it might alleviate the stress in the other subterranean galleries. I'll think more about it after I fix the seal, Zhang Xian thought as he hastened his speed. It has already been so long. Why isn't Xianer back yet? Sword Saint Meng paced around the room in vexation. Her son had said that he was just going to scout the situation. But 2 hours had already passed, and there was still nothing at all. She could not help but worry about his safety. He might have just met with some small hiccups. Don't worry, Our Xiener has many means up his sleeves. Nothing will happen to him. Sword Saint Xing patted his wife's back and consoled her. But that's the army of the otherworldly demonic tribe that we're talking about. There were at least 10,000 soldiers in the previous clash with them. Even Yang sure wouldn't stand a chance against them. How can our Xiener withstand something like that? Sword Saint Meng exclaimed anxiously. With the opponent being 10,000 well-trained otherworldly demons of Saint 3 Dan and above, there was no one who could possibly not worry. I hate to admit this, but there's nothing we can do but trust our son. We don't have the same concealment technique that he has. And if we are caught while attempting to check on his condition, we will just put him in a worse position, Sword Saint Xing said. He was worried about his son too, but it was clear that there was nothing that they could do to help him. Sword Saint Xing turned to Luo Ruoxin and asked, Ruoxin, what do you think of the matter? The young lady before him had been perfectly calm all this while, as if she was not worried about Zhang Xian at all. This had left him rather perplexed. Zhang Xian will be fine, Luo Ruoxin replied with composure. Putting aside the fact that he had comprehended 3 quintessences and possessed nearly impeccable disguise means, just his current prowess paired with the Dragonbone Divine Spear would already be a huge headache for anyone to deal with. Unless an ancient sage appeared, it would be impossible for the otherworldly demons to get him. Since that was the case, there was nothing for her to worry about. But, seeing how confident Luo Ruoxin was, Sword Saint Meng could not help but frown. She was just about to ask the reason behind Luo Ruoxin's unwavering confidence in Zhang Xian, when an elder suddenly rushed into the room. Old clan head, is Xiener back yet? Sword Saint Xing immediately stood up in agitation. The elder who had just entered was in charge of intelligence gathering in the Zhang clan. The fact that he had come over in such hurry meant that he had some important news to report. That's not it. The otherworldly demonic tribe has just blown a horn to gather all of their soldiers. I fear that they might be launching another attack very soon, the elder said grimly. An attack? Sword Saint Xing's face immediately turned severe. What happened? Tell me the details. I sent some scouts to the otherworldly demons' encampment, but their defense was simply too tight. My men could only skirt the perimeters, unable to get too close. However, an hour ago, a horn suddenly sounded, and following which, the otherworldly demon soldiers began to retreat back into the camp. Even those who are responsible for upholding the defensive formations, keeping a lookout, and even the patrols left their positions. Fearing that it might be a trap, our men didn't dare get too close initially. However, there was still no movement after waiting for 15 minutes, so they slowly advanced deeper into the camp to scout the situation. They found that the otherworldly demons were divided into 10 huge groups, in order to practice some kind of unique formation. Furthermore, the commander whom you clashed with previously said that he wanted to try a new collaborative formation, and was going to launch a surprise assault with it. Hearing up to that point, our scouts dared not waste any time. They immediately rushed back here to report the matter to me as soon as possible. It's fortunate that your scouts delivered the intelligence back in time. Otherwise, if their surprise assault were to succeed, our Zhang clan would have sustained heavy losses. Sword Saint Xing heaved a sigh of relief. This piece of intelligence was simply too important. If they had really been caught off guard, it could have ended disastrously for the Zhang clan. Taking a deep breath, Sword Saint Xing's voice reverberated across the entire fortress. Offspring of the Zhang clan, heed my orders. The otherworldly demons are preparing to launch a surprise assault. All of you are to stand on level 1 wariness right now. Yes, old clan head. Hearing the orders, the members of the Zhang clan swiftly got into their positions to ready themselves for the impending battle. In an instant, the atmosphere turned incomparably solemn. After issuing the instructions to the members of the Zhang clan, Sword Saint Xing turned to the crowd around him and said, Elders, follow me out of the city to meet the otherworldly demons. Since they are going to launch a surprise assault, we might just be able to take advantage of that, catch them off guard. Very well. The elders nodded, and the crowd swiftly flew out of the city. The outskirts of the fortress were cloaked with a thick layer of mist, making it difficult to see too far ahead. Peering into the depths of the mist, and a knit suddenly appeared between Luo Ruoxin's eyebrows. Without any hesitation, she quickly flew ahead. Ruoxin, not expecting the young lady to be so reckless, the Xingming Sword Saints frowned. The rest of you stand guard over here. We'll head over to take a look. Knowing that they would lose Ruoxin if they didn't follow her right now, Sword Saint Xing swiftly issued some instructions to the elders before departing with Sword Saint Meng to chase after Ruoxin. Why is there no one at all? The further the Xingming Sword Saints flew, the more perplexed they were by the situation. Logically speaking, given how far they had traveled, they should have encountered some otherworldly demons by now. Yet, why was there not a single person in sight? Regardless of whether they were going to launch a surprise assault or not, surely they should at least upkeep their basic defenses? If the otherworldly demons were truly so careless, there was no way they would have been able to stand against the Master-Teacher Pavilion for so many years. Look in front. Just as Sword Saint Xing was still pondering over the matter, Sword Saint Meng's voice suddenly sounded. He quickly raised his head and saw row after row of otherworldly demons lying motionlessly on the ground. Their hair was raised high in the air, and their faces were charred black. White foam flooded the corners of their mouth. They were all dead. Luo Ruoxin was kneeling in the midst of these corpses with a frown between her eyebrows, seemingly trying to examine for something. What happened? Seeing the otherworldly demons who had left them in a fluster lying dead on the ground, the Xingming Sword Saints were utterly stunned. They were killed by Zhang Xian, Luo Ruoxin said as she rose to her feet. They were killed by Xian. How could that be? Unless one's an ancient sage, there is no way any cultivator could eradicate an entire army of otherworldly demons. Sword Saint Xing could hardly believe what he was hearing. It was not that he did not trust his son, but the enemy consisted of 10,000 otherworldly demons at Saint 3 Dan and above. Furthermore, there were also a few great sages in their ranks. Even with his son's prowess, it was impossible for him to kill all of them single-handedly. He used the power of lightning against them. These otherworldly demons were caught off guard and electrocuted. Most of them died in the electrocution, but those who survived were paralyzed by the lightning and killed nevertheless. Luo Ruoxin analyzed. Lightning? The Xingming Sword Saints quickly turned their gazes to the corpses on the ground, and indeed, there were burn marks on their bodies. At this moment, they could not help but remember that their son had the ability to summon lightning tribulation, to actually defeat an army of 10,000 single-handedly. Even when they were seeing the results with their own eyes, they still felt like they were dreaming. Since these people are already dead, where is Xian? Sword Saint Meng quickly searched around the area. No matter how many means her son had, he was bound to be in a bad condition after facing so many enemies at once. No matter what, she would not feel reassured until she saw how he was doing, and whether he was injured or not. He has probably gone to the seal. Luo Ruoxin stood up and continued venturing forward. Considering how the threat was already resolved, the chances were that he had gone to repair the spatial seal. It was not too difficult to deduce this much. The group quickly advanced ahead, and it did not take long for them to arrive before the spatial seal. At this very moment, the spatial seal was already completely mended. The energy pulses within the spatial seal were a sign that the repairs had just been completed. It's Xian'er's Jinqi, but where is he? Sword Saint Meng could tell that the barrier had been mended using Zhang Xian's Jinqi. The fact that he could still repair the spatial seal meant that he was likely fine. However, where did he disappear to? She had her spiritual perception cast as wide as possible for fear that she would miss her son. If her son was truly still around, she should have already found him by now. It looks like he has traversed across the seal to head to the otherworldly battlefield. Luo Ruoxin frowned. He went over to the other side. How can he be so reckless? Sword Saint Meng nearly fainted from shock upon hearing those words. This won't do. I must save him. Sword Saint Meng was hot-tempered, but she was rarely reckless. In fact, she was an extremely rational person, knowing clearly what she could and could not do. However, whenever it came to matters concerning her son, she seemed to swiftly lose her rationality. Allow me to go over instead. If the two of you head over, It's likely that you'll meet with danger before meeting Zhang Xian. Luo Ruoxin suddenly interjected. The Xingming sword saints were powerful, but fighting in the otherworldly battlefield was a different matter from fighting in the subterranean gallery. The killing intent in the otherworldly battlefield was so great that it would suppress their fighting prowess considerably. On top of that, their auras would stand out like a lighthouse in the night, making them easy targets. If they entered, it was likely that they would be captured and killed by the otherworldly demons before even finding Zhang Xian. You, Sword Saint Meng frowned. It's too dangerous to venture beyond the venture seal. Your current strength. It was not that she did not believe Luo Ruoxin, but the latter had never revealed her cultivation before. Back at the Luo clan, it was her subordinate Wu Chun, and not her who battled with the elders. They had guessed that she was likely a formidable expert, but it was just a deduction on their part. Don't worry. Knowing that the other party was worried about her, Luo Ruoxin chuckled softly. You should return to the city and inform the others of this news. Get them to clear the otherworldly demon corpses and move the defense line up to the spatial seal. As for the rest, leave it to me. After saying those words, she pushed her hand toward them lightly. Who? The Xingming sword saints suddenly found their surroundings blurring before their eyes. The sight before them distorted, and all of a sudden, they found that they were already back in the main hall of the fortress. The two of them widened their eyes in astonishment. To be able to bring them accurately back to the main hall with just a push. Just how deep was her comprehension of spatial laws? Not even Yang Shi was capable of a feat like that. Could she be an ancient sage? Sword Saint Meng uttered with an incredulous look on her face. She knew that the woman whom her son loved possessed extraordinary strength, possibly stronger than them even. However, she did not think that the latter would actually be so formidable. They could even put up a fight against sempiternal realm cultivators if they collaborated with one another. And yet the other party was able to teleport them back without them knowing. If she diverted her abilities to offense, her fighting prowess was bound to be formidable. Ancient sage? How could there be such a young ancient sage on the master-teacher continent? Sword Saint Xing shook his head and refuted Sword Saint Meng's guess. He pondered for a moment, but he was unable to fathom how powerful Luo Ruoxin was. Thus, he could only shake his head and say, "All right, let's not think too much into it for the time being. In any case, I think we should be able to entrust Xian'er in her hands." After saying those words, he flew toward the aerial space of the fortress and commanded, "Offspring of the Zhang clan, hear my command. Set forth right away to collect our spoils of war." Collect our spoils of war? The elders guarding outside the city were surprised to hear such an announcement, and bewildered to see the person who had made the announcement. They had seen their clan head advancing deeper into the otherworldly demon encampment, but before they knew it, their clan head was suddenly behind them. This was a truly perplexing sight to them. Clan head Zhang Xian has infiltrated the otherworldly demon encampment and slain the 10,000 otherworldly demons that we are at war with. With this, the crisis at the Drakatiger Mountain subterranean gallery has been resolved. Seeing the looks of bewilderment below, Sword Saint Xing explained the situation with hearty laughter. Our clan head killed 10,000 otherworldly demons single-handedly? The otherworldly demon army that we were helpless against was annihilated by our clan head alone. Am I hearing things? In an instant, everyone in the Zhang clan froze on the spot. They were all shocked silly. They had heard stories of heroes charging into the midst of an army to decapitate the enemy commander's head. And they had also heard of experts valiantly fighting against hundreds simultaneously. But for a single man to destroy an entire army, what in the world was happening? Oblivious to the happenings in the Zhang clan, Zhang Xian was swiftly advancing ahead in the otherworldly battlefield. A world as vast as the master-teacher continent, the horizon was nowhere in sight. There was no sun in the world, just a crimson moon hanging above, bringing an air of desolation to the world beneath. The killing intent of this world seemed to be concentrated on the crimson moon, as if the unique jinqi of the otherworldly demonic tribe had originated from there. Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. This place truly feels like a living hell. It's no wonder the otherworldly demonic tribe want to conquer the master-teacher continent. Even though his Heaven's Path Jinchi granted him protection against killing intent, he felt that his mind would slowly become warped and violent if he stayed there for a prolonged period of time. Slowly but surely, he would start to desire bloodshed. This world truly was not a hospitable place. If he had been an otherworldly demon, he would have barged over to the master-teacher continent as well. I don't think I'll be able to find my way around without a map. Should I return first and wait for Vicious to awaken before coming back? In truth, it was mostly out of curiosity that he had gone over to the otherworldly battlefield. Realizing that he would not be able to navigate his way around efficiently, he felt that it would be better for him to return for the time being. Otherwise, it would be really disastrous if he lost his sense of direction. Just as Zhang Xian was about to turn back, he heard a gale sounding not too far away. Following which, the voice of an otherworldly demon cultivator was heard. Hurry up! Zhang Xian swiftly used the spatial quintessence of sealing to conceal his figure, before heading in the direction that the voice had originated from. It did not take long for him to arrive at the foot of a mountain, where he found 4 otherworldly demons loitering. Spiritual energy was surging in from the surroundings. It seemed like the otherworldly demons were trying to drive some kind of formation. Of the 4 otherworldly demons, the stronger one was at Sempiternal Realm, wielding strength comparable to Mao Wu. The remaining 3 were only at Great Sage One Dan Introspective Convalescence Realm. Right in front of them was a teleportation formation. However, gauging from the formation flags around, the formation seemed to be really old. As such, it would take some difficulty to reactivate it. The strongest otherworldly demon was glaring at the other 3 with a furious gaze. The one who had hollered earlier was him as well. Lord Mo Yi, I am already trying my best, but this formation is simply too old. There's nothing I can do either. One of the otherworldly demons driving the formation protested timidly. Cut the crap and get to work. If this doesn't work out, you and our heads will roll. Mo Yi waved his hand coldly. Yes. Not daring to protest anymore, the otherworldly demon drove his Jinchi furiously into the formation. The rate at which spiritual energy was gathering in the area hastened, and the ancient formation began to flicker. It seemed as if it would come to life at any moment. However, the face of the otherworldly demon, driving the formation, was swiftly paling as well. He seemed to be reaching the limits of his stamina. Hurry up and help me, the otherworldly demon exclaimed to the remaining 2. The other 2 introspective convalescence realm otherworldly demons unhesitatingly bit their fingers and offered their blood to the teleportation formation. Wang. In an instant, the spiritual energy in the surroundings grew so dense that it almost felt tangible. A brilliant light shone off from the teleportation formation. Good. Seeing that the teleportation formation had been activated, Mo Yi harumphed coldly before stepping into it. Who? Enveloped by the light, a dimension rift appeared before Mo Yi. He stepped in and swiftly disappeared from sight. Pada! As soon as Mo Yi left, the remaining 3 introspective convalescence realm cultivators slumped onto the ground. It seemed like activating the formation had sapped their strength dry. It's fortunate that we managed to pull it off, or else our heads would have been lopped off. Despite their exhaustion, the trio had relieved smiles on their faces. If the formation had not been activated, they would have lost their lives. While they were in the midst of celebrating their small success, a towering otherworldly demon suddenly walked up to them. Lord Mao Wu. Upon seeing the towering otherworldly demon, the trio hurriedly got to their feet and greeted him. Undrive the formation. I want to go to where Mo Yi just went. Mao Wu waved his hand imposingly. It went without saying that this Mao Wu was an impersonation from Zhang Xian. Considering how Mo Yi was in such a rush to leave via a teleportation formation, there was no doubt that he had something urgent to attend to. Since he had seen it, it went without saying that he had to stop the other party. At the same time, this was a good opportunity for him to learn about what was going on in the otherworldly demonic tribe. Lord Mao Wu, you wish to head to the Thousand Leaf Sea too? The otherworldly demons who had activated the formation nearly burst into tears. They had nearly exhausted themselves to death activating the teleportation formation once. If they had to do it once more, they might just lose their lives. One of the otherworldly demons gritted his teeth and said, Lord Mao Wu, pardon me for asking this, but weren't you heading to Rivistar under Sovereign Qinling's orders? Picking up on the phrase Rivistar, Zhang Xian pondered silently for a moment. Considering that Mao Wu had gone to the Dracatiger Mountain subterranean gallery earlier, with Sovereign Qinling's edict in hand, it was likely that the Rivistar mentioned by the otherworldly demon referred to that. It seemed like the names that humans and otherworldly demons had for certain locations differed from one another. I have already resolved the matter at Rivistar. Sovereign Qinling has just instructed me to make my way over to the Thousand Leaf Sea in order to meet up with Mo Yi. Do you need me to report all of my actions to you? Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes as killing intent burst forth from his body. Power began billowing beneath his thick armor, and it seemed like he would make a move at any moment. Mao Wu's armor was identical to Heng Zhang's, so he only had to alter his appearance a little in order to personate the other party. I dare not question Lord Mao Wu's movements. The otherworldly demons immediately paled in fright. He hurriedly turned his attention to the teleportation formation and began infusing his Jinqi. However, as he had just exerted himself too much, his stamina was already at its limits. The other two otherworldly demons knew that they would be punished if they could not activate the teleportation formation for Mao Wu as well, so they quickly rushed over to aid their companion. I have just finished dealing with the matters at Rivistar, and am still unaware of the situation over at the Thousand Leaf Sea. Tell me, what's the progress there? Watching as the otherworldly demons squeezed every last drop of their Jinqi into the teleportation formation, Zhang Xian dropped such a question leisurely. Since Rivistar referred to the Dracatiger Mountain subterranean gallery, it was likely that the Thousand Leaf Sea was the name of another subterranean gallery. In fact, if his guess was correct, it was likely one of the 6 subterranean galleries that the otherworldly demons were focusing their manpower on. It would be good if he could head over there and resolve the crisis there. This would alleviate the pressure the others were facing. Reporting to Lord Mao Wu, we aren't privy to such information, so we aren't too sure either. However, Lord Mo Yi mentioned earlier that both Sovereign Qinxing and Sovereign Qinling have issued an order in unison for the reserve army stationed at the Thousand Leaf Sea to launch an attack on the humans right away. One of the otherworldly demons replied hurriedly, Reserve army? Launch an attack right away? Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. Back at the Dracatiger Mountain subterranean gallery, Sword Saint Xing noticed that the otherworldly demons were in no rush to attack the Zhang clan, and wondered if they might be waiting for reinforcements. An army of 10,000 was already a handful to deal with. If they had to deal with reinforcements, it would really be a nightmare for the Zhang clan. Deducing based on the information that he had received so far, it seemed like the Thousand Leaf Sea was not a subterranean gallery, but a military barrack where the reinforcements were all stationed. This was not good news. Without a doubt, the master teachers stationed in the subterranean gallery, where the reserve army was mobilized to would definitely face great danger. Furthermore, this was an order that Sovereign Qinxing and Sovereign Qinling had ordered in unison. The orders that Heng Jiang had received from Sovereign Qinling and Sovereign Qinxing earlier had been conflicting. The former had commanded him to launch an attack right away, whereas Sovereign Qinxing had commanded him to remain on standby. In other words, it seemed like there was some disharmony among the sovereigns. Yet, the two of them actually made a call in unison to launch an attack. How many soldiers are there at the Thousand Leaf Sea? Is it possible to divert some men over to reinforce Rivistar? Zhang Xian continued asking casually. The soldiers at the Thousand Leaf Sea are the strongest soldiers of our otherworldly demonic tribe, the elites under Sovereign Qinling and Sovereign Qinxing's command. They number over 100,000. The otherworldly demon replied proudly. 100,000? Zhang Xian nearly stumbled upon hearing that number. 10,000 otherworldly demon soldiers was already enough to force the Zhang clan to mobilize all of its forces and descend to the subterranean gallery to fight a desperate battle. If 100,000 otherworldly demon soldiers were mobilized simultaneously, Not even the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters would be able to suppress them. Who could have thought that the otherworldly demonic tribe would actually have an army of such a scale? Would they still be able to protect the Master-Teacher Pavilion against such a powerful foe? That's right. The otherworldly demons seem to know quite a bit about this matter. This is the first time that the two sovereigns have worked with one another. They have gathered all of the experts of the otherworldly demonic tribe together in order to push open a path to the Master-Teacher continent. Most of the soldiers from the other subterranean galleries have already headed over to the Thousand-Leaf Sea. The only reason Rivistar didn't receive the order is because it's too far away. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian discreetly heaved a sigh of relief. He had thought that the otherworldly demons were assaulting all 108 subterranean galleries simultaneously, and still had a reserve army of 100,000 strong to reinforce them wherever required. If that was the case, that would really have been frightening. Fortunately, that was not so. It seemed like Sovereign Chen Ling and Sovereign Chen Xing had issued orders to have the soldiers from the different subterranean galleries regroup at the Thousand-Leaf Sea. Afterward, they would focus their fighting power on breaching a single subterranean gallery. Another thing that he noted from the otherworldly demon's words was that this was the first time that Sovereign Chen Ling and Sovereign Chen Xing had worked together. This further verified his deduction that the three sovereigns of the otherworldly demonic tribe were not on good terms. In fact, it was likely that they were apprehensive of one another, and there was a little bit of infighting going on that had probably hindered them from cooperating with one another, thus preventing the otherworldly demonic tribe from launching a decisive assault all this while. All of a sudden, the otherworldly demon noticed that something was amiss and exclaimed, "That's not right. Lord Mao Wu, you are a commander of our otherworldly demonic tribe. How can you not know all this?" The other two otherworldly demons widened their eyes as realization dawned on them, and they swiftly directed menacing gazes toward Zhang Xian. "You're right. I suppose Lord Mao Wu should have known all this." Seeing that he had been exposed, Zhang Xian could not be bothered to keep up with his disguise anymore and chuckled softly. "He isn't Lord Mao Wu. Attack." The three otherworldly demons narrowed their eyes menacingly as they prepared to leap at the person before them. However, before they could do so, a massive silhouette in the sky was already falling swiftly on them. Pada, the otherworldly demon, driving the formation, was crushed into mincemeat, following which, a skeletal dragon surged forward and bit off the head of another otherworldly demon. At the same time, a demonic saber easily severed the last otherworldly demon in half. Those three otherworldly demons were only in the introspective convalescence realm. Since they had seen through his disguise, all he had to do was silence them. After cleaning up the corpses, Zhang Xian infused his Jinqi into the old teleportation formation before him, and amid shimmering light, he vanished on the spot. With his expertise as a formation master and his comprehension of space, activating the formation was a walk in the park to him. With a jolt, he appeared at the other end of the teleportation formation. With a sweeping gaze of his surroundings, he found that he was standing amid a massive valley. Mountains of different heights meandered through the area, obscuring the area from public view. Paying respects to the commander, barely after stabilizing his posture, he heard voices sounding by the side. They were the soldiers tasked with the responsibility of standing guard over the teleportation formation. They did not seem to be too highly ranked. Most likely, they had only recognized him from the helmet and armor that he was wearing. Zhang Xian nodded perfunctorily as he stepped forward with widened strides. A crimson moon hung above a distant mountain, and a slight layer of mist drifted amid the mountain range. Despite the sinister air lingering in the area, Zhang Xian had to admit that the scenery was breathtaking, almost like a still painting. There were countless soldiers standing in neat formations throughout the massive valley. Their movements were extremely organized, and there was not the slightest dissonant sound to be heard. Just from the discipline alone, it was apparent that the soldiers were well trained. As the reserve army consisted of soldiers from many different subterranean galleries, while Mao Wu's face appeared a little foreign to most, no one doubted his identity. The further he advanced, the more shocked Zhang Xian became. Just like the otherworldly demon soldiers dispatched to the Dracatiger Mountain subterranean gallery, even the weakest of the soldiers standing in this very valley was at St. Three Dan. If this army of 100,000 made a move simultaneously, even ancient sages would have to back down in the face of their might. I have to stop them, or else many lives will be lost, Zhang Xian thought with a frown. After tens of thousands of years of development, the Master-Teacher Pavilion was indeed capable of rallying 100,000 cultivators of St. Three Dan and above. However, it would take time to do so. Furthermore, due to the otherworldly demons invading all 108 subterranean galleries simultaneously, the human cultivators had been forced to scatter all over the Master-Teacher continent to fend them off. If this army launched an assault right now, there was no way that the Master-Teacher Pavilion would be able to put up a sufficient defense in time to stop it. And once the otherworldly demons started pouring into the Master-Teacher continent, many innocent civilians would be massacred. He had to stop this army by hook or by crook. But how was he supposed to go about doing so? Even ancient sages would not dare confront an army of such scale easily, let alone him. If he showed the slightest anomaly in his actions, he would be deader than a doornail before he knew it. He could consider using the Heaven's Path Jinqi to poison the soldiers, but even if he depleted every last drop of his Jinqi, it was unlikely that it would be sufficient to stop the army in its tracks. The lightning method did work earlier, but he did not have any seer artifacts to work with at the moment. Besides, he would require the soldiers to heed his command first. Let me see if I can find their highest commander. If I can kill him and take control of the army, I might just be able to pull something off. To deal with an army, the most effective method was to first nab its commander. He could not think of a feasible plan that would allow him to incapacitate the entire army at once, so the best thing that he could do at the moment was claim the initiative. If he could assume the highest role in the army, he would be in a better position to do something about the matter. Thus, Zhang Xian activated his Eye of Insight and began scanning his surroundings. It did not take long for a huge tent with a group of soldiers standing guard outside to come into his sight. Knowing that it was likely the commander's tent, he began making his way over. While strutting over to the tent, he passed by a remote area. With a swift flick of his finger, he warped the space around him and disappeared from sight. After concealing himself, he began flitting toward the huge tent, and it did not take long before he was standing before it. Sha. After waiting outside for a while, a person dressed in a black helmet and armor, presumably a commander like Heng Jiang and Mao Wu, pried open the tent flap and walked in. Zhang Xian casually entered right behind him as well. There was a fire stove within the room that kept the tent slightly warm. Gazing across the tent, Zhang Xian saw 18 other otherworldly demons seated within. They were dressed in black helmets and armor, which indicated that they were commanders as well. They are all sempiternal realm cultivators. Zhang Xian's eyebrows leaped up in astonishment. To his astonishment, they were all great sage for Dan's sempiternal realm cultivators, wielding strength comparable to Mao Wu. This was especially so for the middle-aged man, seated at the very center with a golden saber in his grip. Zhang Xian could vaguely sense that his strength was on par with Yang Shi's. In an instant, Zhang Xian's body stiffened on the spot. He dared not even twitch for fear of catching their attention. It was fortunate that he did not barge in recklessly, but followed behind another commander. Otherwise, even with his spatial seal, his abrupt intrusion would likely have made the experts gathered here notice an anomaly. He had made huge advancements in his cultivation during this period of time, but he was not so naive as to think that he would be able to get away unscathed from the clutches of so many sempiternal realm experts. Reporting to the High Commander, Bei Xian refuses to comply with our demands. The commander who had just entered the room clasped his fist and gave his report. He refuses to comply. The middle-aged man seated at the center replied impassively. He said that their resources are limited too, so they can't afford to share anything with us. He suggests that we should just keep our inventories separate, so as to avoid getting into meaningless squabbles over this matter. The commander said, "Meaningless squabbles?" He sure has everything planned out well. He expects us to take the vanguard, but he isn't even willing to lend us a single set or armor. It's clear that he regards us as nothing more than stepping stones to achieve his aims. Sovereign Chunxing has always been known to be a greedy person, but who could have thought that Bei Xian would be so cunning too? We have already agreed to collaborate with one another on this attack, but he wants to get away with contributing nothing at all. He's daydreaming. Upon hearing the words of the arriving commander, a huge uproar broke out within the room. The middle-aged man raised his hand to gesture for the crowd to quiet down. Tell them that it's fine if they don't want to contribute any resources. However, their side must send an army in as well, and we'll advance alongside them. Otherwise, they'll have to give us the celestial armors forged by Sovereign Chunxing. I won't ask for too much, just 100 sets. Otherwise, we'll just have to settle it with a fight. If he wins, I'll abide by his arrangements. But if I win, he'll have to cut this nonsense and heed my words. Yes, High Commander. The commander quickly nodded and backed out of the room. Zhang Xian hesitated for a moment, but eventually, he chose to leave the room together with the commander. Following behind the latter, he soon noticed another huge tent in the distance. From their conversation, it seems like even though the reserve army numbers up to a hulking 100,000, they are divided into two factions. One is sided toward Sovereign Chunxing, whereas the other is under Sovereign Chunling. Zhang Xian swiftly sorted through the information that he had acquired so far. He had no idea whom the two sovereigns were, but it was apparent that even though they had decided to work with one another, there was still some strife between the two factions. The more friction there is between them, the better. If I could just spark the friction into raging flames and make them fall out with one another, I might just be able to resolve the crisis. Zhang Xian thought with brightly lit eyes. If the 100,000 soldiers united together as one, there would really be nothing that he could do. He would just have to swiftly return to the subterranean gallery and inform the Master-Teacher Pavilion and the various major powers of the matter through his communication jade token, so that they could make preparations in advance. However, since there was some disharmony between the two factions, it seemed like this was an opportunity that he could exploit. Thus, Zhang Xian swiftly altered his appearance before tearing away the spatial barrier around him, revealing himself. Cough! Zhang Xian intentionally released a cough to catch the commander's attention. Who is it? The commander was in the midst of heading over to the opposite tent when he heard the cough. He quickly turned around, and upon seeing the person standing before him, he jolted in shock. He bowed in a fluster and greeted him. Hi, Commander. Do you have any other orders for me? The person whom Zhang Xian was impersonating was the middle-aged man seated in the center of the room earlier, the High Commander. Imitating the High Commander's voice and enunciation, Zhang Xian looked at the commander and said, There's something that I want you to relay to Bei Xian for me. High Commander, feel free to relay your orders. Come closer. This matter mustn't be made known to anyone else. Zhang Xian said gravely. Yes, High Commander. The commander was perplexed as to why Zhang Xian could not use Jinqi telepathy to talk to him discreetly, but he still chose to lean his head closer in any way. As a show of deference to the High Commander, he kept his head lowered respectfully. They were in the depths of the otherworldly demonic tribe's main camp. The thought that anyone would be so audacious as to impersonate the High Commander was so ludicrous that it did not even cross his mind. It's like this. With a suppressed voice, Zhang Xian began speaking. But on the third word, a cold flash of light sliced through the air. The commander instantaneously sensed danger. But before he could do anything, the world was already spinning around him. His head had been lopped off his neck. It was a completely unexpected strike, and the killing blow was made using the half-ancient sage infernal black saber. Even though the commander was at the sempiternal realm, he still ended up falling victim to Zhang Xian. Of course, part of the reason was that the commander was only at sempiternal realm primary stage. If he had been any more powerful, things would not have been so simple. Zhang Xian swiftly threw the commander's corpse into his storage ring and erased all traces of the assassination. Following which, He warped his muscles and bones to assume the appearance of the dead commander. The assassination had occurred in the middle of the camp, where there were many otherworldly demon soldiers running about. However, as Zhang Xian had made sure to seal the surrounding space before making a move, the act did not catch anyone's attention. After putting on the commander's armor and helmet, he began striding over to the huge tent before him. Just as he reached the entrance, 2 guards raised their spears and blocked his passageway. Audacious! I have come here in representation of our High Commander. Go and report my arrival. Zhang Xian placed his hands behind his back and spoke authoritatively. One of the guards hesitated for a moment, before turning around to enter the tent. A moment later, he beckoned with his hand. Please enter. With a haughty harumph, Zhang Xian strutted into the tent. Similar to the tent that he was in before, there were over a dozen sempiternal realm cultivators sitting all around. The otherworldly demon sitting at the center had an aura that did not pale in comparison to the High Commander in the other tent. Most likely, he was the High Commander of Sovereign Chunxing's faction Bei Xian. Noticing Zhang Xian's arrival, Bei Xian shot a glance over and asked coldly, "Has Wuxia agreed to my terms?" "Our High Commander has agreed to the terms. However, there are several details that he hopes to discuss with you." Zhang Xian nodded in response. "A wise decision from your High Commander. It seems like Wuxia isn't as obstinate as the others make him out to be." Bei Xian did not think that the other party had acceded to his demands, and he burst into hearty laughter. "Where does he want to discuss the matter?" "As this matter concerns the alliance of both of our factions, there's a need to take things carefully. Thus, he suggests the meeting to be at the narrow valley in between the 2 tents. If you don't have any objections to the matter, please head there an hour from now. Our High Commander will be waiting for you there." Zhang Xian reported. While he was making his way over earlier, he had noticed that there was a narrow valley around. "All right. Tell Wuxia that I'll be there." Bei Xian nodded. "Farewell." Zhang Xian lowered his head and backed out of the room. As soon as Zhang Xian left, the commanders in the tent anxiously got to their feet and clasped their fists. "High Commander, Wuxia is known to be a scheming fellow. I fear that he might be up to no good. Indeed, I find it hard to believe that he would accept our terms. Most likely, he's intending to ambush us to force us to comply with their terms." The commanders exclaimed worriedly. "If they think that such trivial schemes will work against me, they are too naive. Besides, this is the will of the 2 sovereigns, and all of you will be in the vicinity too. He won't do anything that would compromise the success of the alliance." Bei Xian harumphed coldly. He whipped out a spear and brandished it forcefully, tearing open a dimension rift in its trajectory. "However, we should still be prepared in case they attempt to pull anything funny. Later on, I want you all to scout the area around the valley. If you notice any anomalies, report them to me immediately." Bei Xian said. "Yes, High Commander," the crowd replied resoundingly. After leaving Bei Xian's tent, Zhang Xian returned in the direction that he had come from, and it did not take long for him to arrive at the other huge tent. Reporting to the High Commander, "I have just relayed your words to Bei Xian, but he..." With an awkward look on his face, Zhang Xian lowered his gaze with a conflicted look on his face, seemingly unsure whether he should continue or not. "Speak," High Commander Wuxia ordered. "He said that, you aren't worthy of being his opponent at all. If you dare challenge him to a duel, he'll have you pummeled till you are on your knees, begging for mercy." Zhang Xian lowered his head fearfully as he spoke with a quivering tone. "He thinks that I'll beg him for mercy? That arrogant bastard. Very well. Let's see how powerful he is to dare utter such words." Voila! Wuxia slammed his fist on the table and rose to his feet. As if a manifestation of his rage, a devastating hurricane seemed to be brewing around him. An inferno of fury could be seen burning in the depths of his eyes. "He says that if you have guts, he will face you in the narrow valley in between the 2 tents an hour from now." Zhang Xian continued speaking fearfully. "Huh. It seems like there's no end to Bei Xian's arrogance. Let's see if he has the strength to back up his words then." Wuxia flicked the golden saber in his grasp, and a choking sound echoed from the surrounding air. A commander in the tent stood up and exclaimed, High Commander, I fear that Bei Exan might have some ploy in mind to utter such arrogant words. I concur, High Commander. I think that there's a good chance that it's a trap. Another commander stood up and remarked in agitation. I have challenged that fellow to a fight before, but he ended up backing down at the last moment. It's unlikely that he has the guts to challenge me to a proper duel. Most likely he's up to something. Mu and Guili, I want the two of you to keep a close watch over the valley. If you notice anything, report it to me right away. Wushu commanded. Yes. Two commanders stood up and left the tent. I am familiar with the area around the valley. Allow me to accompany them for the scouting mission. Zhang Xian clasped his fist. Go on. Wushu waved his hand. Zhang Xian quickly turned around, left the tent, and shouted to the two commanders who had just left. Wait for me. I am familiar with the terrain around the valley, so allow me to bring you over. The two commanders nodded. The three of them swiftly concealed their auras and headed forward. It did not take them long to arrive at a valley. I think it would be best for us to split up and cover an area each. This way, we'll be able to cover each other's blind spots and alarm one another as soon as something happens. Zhang Xian suggested. Feeling that what Zhang Xian said made sense, they swiftly scattered to find a hiding spot each. However, before they could even find a place to conceal themselves, their bodies suddenly jolted before slumping lifelessly to the ground. One had the dragonbone divine spear pierced through his heart, while the head of the other had been severed by the infernal black saber. After slaying the duo, Zhang Xian swiftly took their corpses and cleaned up the area, after which he morphed into Bei Xian's appearance and dashed right toward High Commander Wushu's tent. Before arriving in the tent, he suddenly began laughing maniacally. Wushu, just say if you are afraid to face me. Don't you think it's cowardly of you to plant your men in the area to assault me? Hula. After saying those words, he tossed the three corpses toward the tent before turning around and fleeing as fast as he could. By the time Wushu rushed out of the tent, Zhang Xian had already fled to a remote corner and hidden within a spatial barrier. Wushu looked at the three corpses dumped before his tent. They were Su Mu, Guili, and Li Jia, the three commanders whom he had just dispatched to scout the valley. Immediately realizing what had happened, he nearly exploded on the spot. They had already formed an alliance with one another, but Bei Xian still dared to kill his subordinate so blatantly. This was intolerable. Bei Xian, if I don't kill you, I shan't be known as Wushu. With a furious roar, Wushu dashed right for Bei Xian's tent. At the same time, the commanders behind him were also burning with rage after witnessing the deaths of their comrades. They quickly followed behind Wushu. In the opposite tent, Bei Xian and his commanders were still trying to figure out the motive behind Wushu's offer to talk when a heavy pressure suddenly descended upon them from above. Following which, an overwhelming saber chi sliced through the air and split the tent in two. Hoo! Bei Xian swiftly flew into the air to get a closer look at the assailant when he saw Wushu with his golden saber. His eyebrows shot up, and he roared furiously. Wushu, have you gone mad? What are you trying to pull here? Did the other party not agree to his terms? Why would the other party suddenly rush over with a look that seemed as if he was going to murder someone? Stop putting on an act. You sure are formidable, aren't you? Why don't you prove your worth to me once and for all? Wushu could not even be bothered to waste his time with words anymore. He raised his golden saber and sent another barrage of saber chi toward Bei Xian. Selah. The barrage of saber chi ravaged the surroundings, tearing open countless dimension rifts in the area. An astonishing concentration of killing intent gathered in the area, corroding the souls of those present. You are seeking death. Seeing how Wushu was aiming to claim his life without any hesitation as if a madman, Bei Xian's eyebrows twitched in anger. He flicked his spear upward to fend against Wushu's attack. Ding ding ding! As the two weapons collided with one another, a brilliant flash of light erupted in the sky. The two of them were sempiternal realm consummation experts, invincible among those beneath ancient sage. As they crossed blows with one another, the shock waves of their attacks tore apart the heavens and the earth. Even the light of the crimson moon was overshadowed by their might. Is that fellow insane? The more he fought, the more stifled Bei Xian became. It was just a moment ago that the other party had dispatched an envoy to agree to his demands and request further negotiations. He had already prepared what to say during the negotiation. But who could have thought that before an hour was up, the other party would suddenly charge over and put his life on the line against him? What in the world was he up to? Did he eat gunpowder or something? Wu Shu, can I view your actions to be a desire for the dissolution of our alliance? You should know that if this alliance breaks down, I have no qualms with reporting you to Sovereign Qinling. Bei Xian bellowed coldly. You wish to report me to Sovereign Qinling? Do it then. If you have the guts to kill my subordinates blatantly, what else do I have to lose? Wu Shu bellowed furiously, as he brandished his saber furiously toward the other party. I killed your subordinates? What the hell are you saying? Bei Xian roared back. Don't malign me for something I didn't do. Su Mu Guili and Li Jia. The three of them would be able to equal even a sempiternal realm consummation cultivator in battle. Who else could be the culprit if you not? Wu Shu spat through gritted teeth. Even though his three subordinates were only at sempiternal realm primary stage, their fighting prowess was still relatively formidable. Other than Bei Xian, there was no one else in the entire camp who had the ability to kill them so discreetly. Moreover, that fellow had even dumped the corpses at the entrance of his tent, and there were many eyewitnesses who could bear testimony to that. You are saying that I killed Su Mu, Guili, and Li Jia? Seeing the fury in Wu Shu's eyes, Bei Xian was startled. A contemplative frown surfaced on his forehead as he opened his mouth to explain himself. However, before he could say a word, a fiery inferno suddenly rose from his tent. Someone had set fire to his tent. Following which, a voice sounded from the crowd. Sovereign Qinling never intended to work together with us. They have planted their men around the valley in order to ambush us. Look, even High Commander Wu Mu has brought his men here to wreak havoc. That voice sounded extremely clearly within the silent camp. It was as if a boulder had been tossed into calm waters. The next moment, a huge uproar broke out. Many soldiers had witnessed the furious fight between Wu Shu and Bei Xian in the air, and every single move that they made was deadly, seeking to claim the other's life. They were still wondering what was going on when they heard those words, and realization dawned upon them. Rage swiftly crashed down upon them. Slaughter those traitors. They are just looking for an excuse to attack our men. Those shameless scoundrels. Brothers, charge. We are the proud soldiers of Sovereign Qinling. We mustn't allow others to underestimate us. I have long thought that they were an eyesore. Let's kill them all. Such battle cries could be heard all around. It was as if someone had set their fighting spirits alight. However, as well-trained elites, as furious as they were, they did not make a move. It was insubordination to engage in battle without the command of a superior. At this moment, an otherworldly demon dressed in black helmet and armor flew in the air and roared. What are you waiting for? Those scoundrels have already climbed over our heads. Get back at them. It was a direct command from one of their commanders. With this, the very last hurdle holding them back was torn down. Thus, they began charging toward the other faction with furious war cries. Wu Shu and Bei Xian, who were fighting in the air a moment ago, fell into a daze. They did not expect such a situation to happen at all. Something is wrong. Wu Shu's eyebrows shot up. As furious as he was, as someone who had risen to the position of high commander, he was not a reckless individual. The earlier shouting had come at too coincidental a moment. It effectively ignited the emotions of all soldiers. It was hard to believe that such a matter was not pre-planned. Quickly turning to his subordinate, Wu Shu commanded, He Lin, Chun Mu and Bei Yi, try and calm down the situation below. We can't afford to have infighting happening at such a moment. They had allied with one another not too long ago, and they had not even fought the master-teacher pavilion yet. If they started fighting right from the start, he would not be able to explain matters to Sovereign Qinling. As the leader of an entire army, he could not allow himself to be controlled by his emotions. Yes, the group of three quickly descended among the crowd to stop them. However, not too long later, the commander named He Lin returned and exclaimed, High Commander, bad news. Their men began to attack our men, without giving us a chance to explain ourselves. Chun Mu and Bai Yi attempted to reason to them to stop the attack, but they ended up being killed too. As he said those words, He Lin flicked his wrist, and a couple of corpses appeared by his side. Looking at the corpses, Wu Shu's eyes turned so red that it seemed as if blood would drop from them. Baexian, I have tolerated you again and again, but you are really testing the limits of my patience. Seeing how 5 of his commanders had been killed one after another, Wu Shu could not hold back his rage any longer. He brandished his saber and slashed it down upon Baexian. Brother Wu Shu, this matter isn't as simple as it seems. My men would never dare make a move on your commanders. Baexian hurriedly tried to explain himself, but before he could finish speaking, another otherworldly demon dressed in a black helmet and armor rushed up to Baexian and reported, High Commander, bad news. 6 of our commanders have just been assassinated. Following which, the otherworldly demon flicked his hand, and 6 corpses materialized on the ground. Facing such a situation, Baexian slowly turned his head over and spat through gritted teeth. Wu Shu, what did you just say? Well killed. Wu Shu roared heartily. He had thought that his faction had been taken advantage of all this while, but his subordinates were proving to be no pushovers either. They had already slain 6 of Baexian's commanders. It seems like you are for real this time. Since that's the case, I'll give you what we want. Hearing Wu Shu's words, Baexian could not hold himself back anymore. He raised his spear and thrust it forward. Voila! His spear chi gushed forth with ferocious might. From the tremendous prowess of his spear, it was apparent that he had already comprehended a kind of spear quintessence. Wu Shu did not pale in comparison either. From the sheer might of his saber chi, it was also very clear that he had grasped a type of saber quintessence. In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them were already locked in an intense fight. Let utter chaos descend here. Amid the crowd, the lips of an otherworldly demon crept up as he watched the upheaval before him. He was Zhang Xian. He was the commanders who had reported to Wu Shu and Baexian. If those commanders were to group together with one another, he would have had difficulty trying to assassinate them. However, when they split up from one another, it became much easier for him to kill them, especially since he was able to disguise himself and catch them off guard. In just 10 minutes, he had already slain more than 10 commanders. Through these corpses and his ability to disguise himself impeccably, even figures as intelligent as Wu Shu and Baexian ended up losing themselves to their emotions and were unconsciously being dragged into his scheme. They never could have thought that someone was able to disguise himself impeccably as their subordinates. Commander Mo Qin, what are you doing here? They have already started fighting over there. While Zhang Xian was still watching the commotion, an otherworldly demon, wearing a black helmet and armor, came over and raised his saber. Kacha! The next instant, the head of the otherworldly demon fell to the ground. After beheading the other party, Zhang Xian swiftly altered his appearance to the opposite commander and exclaimed, Commander GMO has been killed. Everyone, you must exact vengeance for him. His voice sounded clearly even among all of the ruckus. Since it was already an upheaval, there was no harm stoking the flames of madness further. Zhang Xian flitted around the battlefield with his clone, the Golden Origin Cauldron, the Infernal Black Saber, and the Dragonbone Divine Spear. They would usually hide themselves amid the crowd, and as soon as an opportunity to strike surfaced, they would swiftly make their move. In less than 10 minutes, the number of otherworldly demons above Saint Nine Dan, who had fallen to him, already numbered several hundred. All of the commanders are already dead. Zhang Xian swiftly combed the battlefield and found that all of the black armored commanders and generals had been killed, and he heaved a sigh of relief. Having cultivated the Saint Ascension Decipher and successfully achieved a breakthrough using Kong Shi's superior breakthrough method, his Junqi could be said to be boundless. Furthermore, the incredible chaos happening around him served as the perfect cover to conceal his tracks. With his disguise ability, no one was able to see through him at all. Basically, the fate of any otherworldly demon whom he set his eyes upon would immediately be sealed. In fact, he had single-handedly killed more than 2/3 of the commanders and generals. Now this is what I call utter chaos. Without any commanders and generals to control the crowd, the order that was still barely maintained among the soldiers fell through completely. On a battlefield of 100,000 soldiers, at least a couple of otherworldly demons died every single second. Even by conservative estimates, at least 20,000 otherworldly demons had already died amid the chaos. Now the key lies in the two high commanders above. As long as they survive, it's only a matter of time before they recover from their irrationality and exert control over their soldiers, thus calming the situation down. Zhang Xian thought as he turned his gaze toward the sky. At this moment, Wuxia and Bei Xian were still locked in an intense fight with one another. Their attacks bore a striking resemblance with one another, and it seemed like they were familiar with each other's moves as well. Thus, while they had sustained some injuries in their prolonged fight, there was still no decisive outcome to their battle. As long as these two men remained standing, they would be able to swiftly bring order back to the army. As high commanders, they were definitely no fools. It was true that they had let anger get the better of them for a moment, but they would surely calm down after fighting for a moment and notice that something was amiss. This would be especially so after they realized that all of their commanders and generals had been assassinated. No matter how foolish they could be, it would be obvious that they had fallen into someone else's trap. I need to kill at least one of them before they come back to their senses. A sharp glint flashed across Zhang Xian's eyes as he racked his brain for a solution. At this moment, however, Wuxia deflected Bei Xian's spear with a powerful brandish of his saber, before retreating a few steps. Following which he declared in a cold voice, "Bei Xian, we won't be able to determine a victor today. Let's just leave it like this for the time being. However, let it be known that I won't let this matter slide. Rest assured that I'll never forget this matter either." Bei Xian spat coldly. As they possessed near equal fighting prowess with one another, they did not have the spare attention to keep track of their surroundings. They knew that chaos had broken out amid the army, but they thought that their commanders and generals would be able to keep the situation under control and limit the casualties. They could not have imagined that so many soldiers would have died within such a short span of time. If they knew, they would have spurted blood on the spot. Before Bei Xian could finish his words, he saw one of his subordinates thrusting his spear right for Wuxia. "We can't let this matter slide like this, High Commander. We should kill him right now. How else can we face the brothers whom his subordinates have slaughtered in cold blood?" Recognizing the person assailing Wuxia as one of his subordinates, a sempiternal realm primary stage cultivator, Bei Xian roared furiously, "Hua Muzha, what the hell are you doing? Stand down." The gap between Hua Muzha and Wuxia was too great. Such an action was tantamount to suicide. "Pardon me for disobeying your commands, but he killed too many of our brothers. Even if I lose my life today, I can't let the deaths of our brothers go to waste." Hua Muzha bellowed with a hint of madness in his voice as he drove his spear forward furiously. Facing Hua Muzha's attacks, Wuxia was on the verge of going insane. The other party spoke of dying at his hands, but the truth was that he was the one having difficulties coping with the other party's offense. He had heard of Hua Muzha's name before, and he was known to be a rather average commander in Bei Xian's faction. When did the other party grow so formidable to be able to pose a threat to him? Ho! Hua Muzha's spear grew faster and faster, forcing Wuxia to retreat in a fluster. At the same time he bellowed to Bei Xian behind him, "High Commander, let's kill him together." At this moment Bei Xian hesitated. It was true that he was infuriated after seeing his subordinates dying right before his eyes, but he had never truly intended to claim Wuxia's life. Wuxia was Sovereign Chunling's subordinate, and if he died there, the alliance would surely fall through. "Hua Muzha, I understand your feelings, but I need you to stand down right now. We'll talk about killing Wuxia later on." Bei Xian attempted to defuse the situation. However, before he could finish his words, he suddenly saw Hua Muzha's figure accelerating abruptly. With a speed almost on the level of teleportation, he charged right up to Wuxia. At the same time, the space around Wuxia suddenly froze, rendering the latter incapable of moving. Bei Xian immediately realized that something was amiss, and he exclaimed in horror, You aren't Huamuja. Boom. Along with the horrified exclamation, Bei Xian immediately dashed forward with his spear and deflected Huamuja's spear with a powerful pierce. Pung! As the two spears collided with one another, a huge shock rippled into the surroundings. Huamuja's spear swiftly disintegrated into dust. Ding 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 ding. At the same time, Wuxia managed to break out of his sealed space, and he hurriedly retreated multiple steps. Cold sweat poured down from his forehead. If not for Bei Xian's timely assistance, Huamuja's spear would have pierced right through his throat, bringing him instant death. Who in the world are you? Are you the one who killed our commanders earlier too? After knocking back Huamuja, Bei Xian pointed his spear menacingly at his subordinate, as he questioned him with a wintry tone. He knew full well how powerful the real Huamuja was, but the person before him was actually able to execute 3 different quintessences simultaneously. This was a feat that even he, a high commander, was incapable of. He would have to be a real fool not to know that Huamuja had been replaced at this point in time. At the same time, all of the suspicions that had drifted through his mind earlier swiftly clicked together, forming a nearly complete picture in his mind. Who would have thought that both he and Wuxia, 2 of the strongest high commanders of the otherworldly demonic tribe, had actually been played like fools? Ha ha ha. I guess I have been exposed. Yes, you are right. I was the one who killed your subordinates. Seeing that his identity had been compromised, Huamuja burst into laughter before transforming into the appearance of a young man. He was none other than Zhang Xian. He had been thinking that as long as he could kill one of the high commanders, everything else would be simple. Who would have thought that he would end up giving himself away instead? In truth, if he had used the Dragonbone Divine Spear earlier, even if Bei Xian had noticed that he was an impersonator, it would have been too late. However, in order not to expose his own identity, he had no choice but to use Huamuja's weapon. Due to the lacking resilience of the weapon, Bei Xian had been able to easily deflect his attack, thus saving Wuxia's life. Die! Realizing that he had been played for a fool, Bei Xian flew into a rage and thrust his spear furiously toward Zhang Xian. You bastard! Wuxia also swiftly realized what was going on, and he could not accept the fact that he had been toyed with. Recalling the demise of his subordinates, he furiously hacked his saber down upon Zhang Xian as well. Tizzi. Even though Bei Xian and Wuxia had never practiced their coordination before, they were well versed in the collaboration formations of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Their spear and saber moved together with impeccable timing to corner Zhang Xian, forcing the young man to retreat time and time again. Zhang Xian swiftly whipped out the Dragonbone Divine Spear to retaliate. While the 2 high commanders had sustained some damage and had exhausted themselves considerably in the previous battle, they were still sempiternal realm consummation cultivators. Having to face 2 of such experts simultaneously, Zhang Xian swiftly found himself being overwhelmed under their offense. With the pressure on him weighing greater and greater, Zhang Xian thought bitterly, "It seems like I have underestimated them." He had thought that the crisis could be resolved with him slaying one of the high commanders, but the situation was starting to turn against him. At this rate, the soldiers would also swiftly notice that something was amiss and halt their attacks. That would render his plan to eradicate this threat once and for all futile. After retreating another 8 steps, Zhang Xian was still trying to figure out a way to turn the tables around, when Wuxia and Bei Xian's heads suddenly exploded with a burst of blood. As their blood descended to the ground, a figure appeared before him. "I told you that we should have just killed them with a punch instead of going through so much trouble. But you just wouldn't listen," Zhang Xian's clone remarked disdainfully as he placed his hands behind his back. With a sweep of his hand, Zhang Xian swiftly stowed the 2 plummeting corpses into his storage ring. When he revealed his true identity earlier, he had made sure to seal the space beneath him, so as to not catch the attention of the soldiers below. Otherwise, if they had realized that someone was making a move on their high commanders, he would have been knocked out of the sky before he could do anything at all. Zhang Xian swiftly scanned the area beneath him, and after confirming that he had not given himself away yet, he heaved a sigh of relief. After which, he turned his sights to his clone, and his lips twitched a little. He had known that there was a chance that his plan to assassinate Wu Shu could fall through, and it would be difficult for him to deal with the two high commanders simultaneously. Thus, he had made his clone lie in wait within a sealed space, prepared to ambush the two high commanders should his initial plan fall through. Fortunately, while his initial plan did not go as smoothly as he had thought it would, his backup plan worked without a hitch. But still, no matter what, Wu Shu and Bei Xian were still great Sage for Dan consummation experts. He had thought that even if his clone caught them off guard, he would only be able to distract them momentarily and keep them tied down. Yet, who would have thought that his clone would actually be able to burst their heads with 2 punches? Could it be that this fellow's strength had grown even stronger than before? Zhang Xian had thought that he would be able to teach his clone a lesson after his recent breakthrough. But it seemed like he was thinking too much. If he tried it, he would surely end up with a bruised face once more. You should go down and find an opportune moment to make an appearance later on. Knowing that he would surely be traumatized if he spoke to his clone for too long, Zhang Xian issued an instruction as he descended to the battlefield beneath. By the time he appeared before the sights of the otherworldly demon soldiers below, he had already morphed himself to assume Wu Shu's appearance. I have already slain Bei Xian. Soldiers of Sovereign Chunling, hear my words. Charge and slaughter those traitors. Even amid the deafening metallic reverberations and war cries on the battlefield, those words resounded in the ears of every soldier present loud and clear. Kill those bastards. Let them know our prowess. Hearing the commands from their own high commander, the morale of the soldiers from Sovereign Chunling's faction rose to a new high. On the other hand, the soldiers from Sovereign Chunxing's faction plummeted to rock bottom. The two factions had initially been equally matched with one another, but it did not take long for the scales to lose balance. As the casualties on Sovereign Chunxing's faction started to pile up, the soldiers were starting to show signs of flight. However, just when the forces on Sovereign Chunxing's faction were about to fall through, a bloodied figure suddenly descended from the sky and punched Wu Shu into the ground. Ha ha ha, how could I, Bei Xian, fall so easily? I only feigned death in order to deceive this fool. Brothers, now that I have killed Wu Shu, it's time for us to make a comeback. We are from Sovereign Chunxing's faction. We can't possibly fall to these weaklings. The bloodied figure declared passionately. Those words injected fighting will into the subdued soldiers of Sovereign Chunxing's faction, driving them to straighten their slumped backs, raise their arms, and roar ferociously once more. Since our high commander is still with us, how can we possibly let him down? We have to kill them, and let them know that we are no pushovers. As the morale of Sovereign Chunxing's faction was pushed to a new high, miserable cries rang out from the soldiers of Sovereign Chunling's faction. With their high commander emerging victorious in the battle among the top echelon, they had thought that their victory was assured. Yet, who would have thought that Bei Xian would make such a comeback? With the disappearance of their high commander, their backbone, the soldiers swiftly flew into a fluster. It did not take long for the tables to turn. The momentum of Sovereign Chunxing's faction swiftly built up, and before long, the soldiers of Sovereign Chunling's faction were starting to flee frightfully. However, right before the complete defeat of Sovereign Chunling's faction, another figure emerged from the ground and knocked Bei Xian flying. Do you think that you are the only one who knows how to play dead? I, Wu Shu, can do the same. In the end, I am still the one who has the last laugh. Soldiers, I have slain Bei Xian. Raise your weapons and show the enemy the might of those who serve Sovereign Chunling. Hearing those words, the crowd turned their sights upward and saw that Wu Shu, who should have died earlier, was gazing down upon the battlefield with an imposing air. The soldiers from both factions were stunned. While we are pitting our lives on the line, our high commanders are continuously feigning their deaths. Is this really fine? Why does it feel like they are treating this intense war as nothing more than a child's play? More importantly, brother, can you at least give a clear signal as to who is alive and who is dead? Don't you know that you are making us really flustered like that? Seeing that the soldiers were stunned still, Wuxia bellowed furiously from the sky. What are you waiting for? Bei Xian has already been killed by me. Hurry up and attack the enemies. Otherwise, I'll have you all executed under the crimes of war treason. Kill. Hearing that the High Commander had passed the order, the soldiers of Sovereign Chunling's faction roared ferociously and charged over. It was yet another intense slaughter, and just when victory was in sight. Ha ha ha. Wuxia, you never would have thought that I was playing dead once more, right? You should feel proud that you have died under my blade. Men, hear my instructions. We shall launch a counterattack, and ensure that none of those dogs of Sovereign Chunling's faction will return alive from here. Yet again, Bei Xian's figure appeared from the horizon and smashed Wuxia flying. The soldiers were completely frenzied. Can one of you two high commanders really just drop dead, so that we can have some closure? To die and come back to life again and again. What are we supposed to make of this situation? Don't you know how exhausted you are making us? For the first time, all of the soldiers found themselves wishing that their high commander would die for real instead of playing dead. It was like a roller coaster ride of highs and lows. Their hearts really could not take such excitement. All right, it's about time. Disregarding the soldiers, who were already on the verge of mental breakdown, Zhang Xian saw that less than 10,000 soldiers were left of the initial 100,000 strong army, and he heaved a sigh of relief. Most of these 10,000 men were severely wounded. Judging from their states, they should not be able to form a collaborative formation strong enough to pose a threat to him anymore. Nevertheless, there was no telling if the otherworldly demons still had some other trump cards in hand. Thus, he had the soldiers continue fighting with one another for roughly another hour. By the end of the hour, more than half of the 10,000 fortunate survivors had been wiped out, leaving less than 5,000 remaining. At this moment, Zhang Xian finally raised his hand, and his clone, the Golden Origin Cauldron, Infernal Black Saber, and Dragonbone Divine Spear charged forth simultaneously. These soldiers were only around Saint 3 Dan to Saint 4 Dan, and most of them were severely wounded. How could they possibly withstand the onslaught of these experts comparable to sempiternal realm cultivators? In less than 10 minutes, they were completely wiped out. Looking at the corpses sprawled all over the ground, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. As the tension left his body, he felt a feeling of exhaustion consuming his body, and his head started to feel a little light. Throughout the battle, he had put his entire effort into disguising himself, so as to ensure that his disguise would not be seen through, and this was rather taxing on him. At this point, his soul energy had nearly been completely depleted. It was fortunate that he had succeeded in the very end. Otherwise, if anyone had noticed that it was a ploy on his part, even with just 10,000 otherworldly demon soldiers remaining, the tables could possibly have turned on him. The power that could be amassed by 10,000 Saint 3 Dan cultivators should never be underestimated. Zhang Xian entered the myriad anthive nest, sat down in an empty clearing, and took out energy replenishing treasures. After absorbing furiously for an entire hour, he finally felt himself recovering a bit. Let me see how many treasures I have gathered this time around. It was a huge contribution for him to slaughter the 100,000 strong army of the otherworldly demonic tribe, thus foiling their plan to invade the Master-Teacher continent. However, what he was more concerned about at the moment was the spoils of war that he had earned from the battle. Putting aside the personal possessions of the 100,000 strong army, just the wealth of the two high commanders and dozens of sempiternal realm cultivators had already far exceeded what the Zhang clan and the Luo clan had amassed over the past 10,000 years. This golden saber is comparable to the infernal black saber. This spear here is likely a half-ancient sage treasure too, Zhang Xian analyzed as his eyes lit up in excitement. Wuxia's golden saber and Bei Xian's saber were actually comparable to Heng Zhang's infernal black saber. Of course, this was to be expected. Even though they had been done in by Zhang Xian in the end, they were still the people in charge of the 100,000 strong army. Zhang Xian drove his heaven's path Xinqi and converted it to the Xinqi of slaughter. It did not take him long to win the acknowledgement of the two artifacts. Soul-slaying black saber, cloud-piercing spear. I have another two weapons in my possession. Let's see if I can find any suitable cultivation techniques for me. While there are no standard cultivation techniques beyond Great Sage, it would still be good for me to take a look at the cultivation techniques of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Perhaps, I might be able to gather some inspiration from their cultivation techniques. Zhang Xian continued searching through the storage rings, but he was not able to find any better weapons. Thus, he decided to turn his attention to the other items in there. At the moment, Zhang Xian's Jinqi cultivation had already reached Great Sage 1 Dan introspective convalescence realm consummation. He had already browsed through the books filled with the insights of the predecessors regarding their breakthroughs in the Great Sage realm, from the Zhang clan and the Luo clan. However, the path that each cultivator had to take would eventually diverge. So naturally, the method through which each of them achieved a breakthrough was different. He could use their insights as a reference to give him some direction, but he could not blindly copy from them. For this reason, even though he had already browsed through many books, he was still unable to find an appropriate method for him to further advance his cultivation. Having slain dozens of sempiternal realm experts, there was a sizable collection of cultivation technique manuals and books detailing the insights that they had regarding their breakthrough. Even though their cultivation techniques and breakthrough methods were significantly different from those of humans, considering how a breakthrough to Great Sage had resulted in his meridian network assuming a form similar to that of the otherworldly demons, could their cultivation techniques be effective on him too? After all, otherworldly demons were a higher level of existence than humans. There could be some benefits to emulating their cultivation techniques. Zhang Xian took out all of the books in the storage rings, and all in all, they numbered several thousand. With a quick glance, he collected all of them into the Library of Heaven's Path. Compile. He swiftly fused them together with the books that he had collected back the Jiang clan, the Luo clan, and so on. Wang. A brand new book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. With a tap, the knowledge within the book flowed in Zhang Xian's mind, and he slowly closed his eyes. The method used by the otherworldly demons to achieve a breakthrough to Aureate body realm was much more complex than that of humans. It demanded the otherworldly demons to tap into the power of the Crimson Moon to augment their Jinqi of slaughter, so as to temper their body. Essentially, it was not a method that humans could use at all. The cultivation technique that he had compiled was not usable. In other words, his previous assumptions did not hold. Nevertheless, even though a Heaven's Path Divine Art Manual was not formed, it did give him some inspiration as to how he could further advance his cultivation. By purifying their bloodlines, those of the beast tribe are able to raise their cultivation further. After humans achieve a breakthrough to Great Sage, their meridians start to develop in a manner that bears some resemblance to that of the otherworldly demonic tribe. In essence, advancing one's cultivation could be said to be raising one's level of existence. My body has already been tempered by the Empyrean heavenly flame, resulting in my body being far stronger than normal Aureate body realm cultivators. So the bottleneck lies not in my physical body but my meridians. As long as I improve my meridians a little more, I should be able to achieve a breakthrough. Zhang Xian mumbled as a glint flashed across his eyes. With his body and primordial spirit tempered by the Empyrean heavenly flame, he was much more formidable than the ordinary Aureate body realm cultivators. Since that was the case, there was unlikely to be much for him to improve in his physical body and primordial spirit anymore. In other words, as long as he improved his meridian network and raised his level of existence, he should be able to easily advance his cultivation to higher realms. He did not need any cultivation techniques at all. Let me give it a try, Zhang Xian thought as he sat down on the floor. Absorbing the spiritual energy from the cultivation resources he had collected, he circulated his Jinqi throughout his body 3 times and raised his condition to the peak. Back then, in order to reconstruct Zhao Ye's meridians, he had derived a new and improved meridian network. Swiftly going through the new meridian network in his mind, he began to slowly reshape the meridians in his body accordingly. Meridians were the very foundations of a cultivator. He dared not alter those that were connected to his dantian and organs in case something went wrong. So he started out by altering those linked to his limbs. Even if ordinary cultivators knew that altering their meridians would allow them to advance their cultivation, they would still be unable to do it. This was because their meridians were a natural part of their body, and the process of altering them could easily lead to unexpected complications. However, having cultivated Kong Shi's superior breakthrough method, Zhang Xian's body had been tempered by the Empyrean heavenly flame, thus raising the resilience of his body far beyond that of his peers. This allowed him to endure the strain of moving his meridians. Using the same method as before, he began moving his meridians slowly. After some time, Hong Long, a burst of killing intent burst forth from the depths of his body, and in an instant, it seemed as if he had become an otherworldly demon himself. This phenomenon was similar to what happened when he reconstructed Zhao Ye's meridians. He did not intentionally alter the attribute of the latter's Jinqi. Instead, the emanation of the otherworldly demon's killing intent seemed to be a natural process of evolution. At this moment, even if he did not rely on the disguise amulet, Wuxia and the others would still have been unable to discern him apart from other otherworldly demons. It works. If one compared meridians to a watercourse, he would just be an ordinary stream at the moment. If he wanted to become a true raging river, the riverbed had to be deepened, the width of the water channel had to be widened, and the meanders along the watercourse had to be reduced. Only then would water be able to flow efficiently through the watercourse. The more Zhang Xian altered his meridians, the greater the strength within his body became. His aura swiftly grew stronger and stronger. The aureate body realm seemed out of touch to him a moment ago, but right now, it was already something completely within reach. It did not take long for him to finish altering the meridians in his limbs. After that was done, Zhang Xian did not rush into the next step. Instead, he chose to take a rest so as to replenish his depleted Jinqi and condition his state back to the peak before continuing. At this moment, his meridians had become much wider, allowing Jinqi to flow unobstructed through them. If he attempted to channel his Jinqi with all his might, it would form a raging current reminiscent of the charge of thousands of cavalry troops. There were mainly minor meridians in the limbs, so it was much easier to alter them. However, the same could not be said for the meridians surrounding one's dantian and internal organs. They intersected one another with the utmost complexity, and the slightest mistake could cause a reversal in one's Jinqi, possibly resulting in paralysis, or even one's cultivation going berserk. Not daring to rush into it, Zhang Xian warily moved each meridian bit by bit with strict accordance to the steps. While he was attempting a breakthrough to the aureate body realm, back on the Master-Teacher continent, the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters found itself with a group of guests. They were none other than Luo Ganzhen and Jiang Fangyu. Entering the main hall, they swiftly took their seats. Is the reason behind your arrival concerning the crisis in the subterranean galleries? Ren Qingyuan looked at his two guests and got straight to the point. Indeed, it seems like the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters have noticed that something is amiss as well. Ren Shi, I would like to request you to share the details of what you know with me, so that we can compare the intelligence we have received. Jiang Fangyu clasped his fist. Ren Qingyuan nodded. Just a day ago, the otherworldly demons in our Master-Teacher Pavilion's subterranean gallery were still incomparably ferocious, seeming as if they wouldn't rest until they breached our defenses. Yet just this afternoon, most of their soldiers suddenly retreated, leaving behind only a small rear guard to defend the area. I thought that it was bait to draw our forces in, so we chose to stand our ground and bide our time. However, even after such a long time, there was still no movements from their side. When we dispatched our scouts to investigate the matter, we realized that most of them have retreated back behind the seal. Did the same situation happen in the subterranean galleries that you are standing guard over? Indeed, we encountered the same peculiarity in our respective subterranean galleries. The otherworldly demons on our side abruptly returned to the otherworldly battlefield as well. I'm not too sure what they are up to at the moment, but I have a bad feeling about it. Luo Ganzhen said grimly. Brother Fangyu, if I'm not mistaken, the reason you urgently gathered us is because you know something about this matter, right? The reason they had all gathered in the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters at this crucial period of time was due to a request made by Jiang Fangyu. I do know something about this matter, and the reason I gathered all of you here so urgently is to discuss the matter. As he spoke, Jiang Fangyu took a sweeping glance at his surroundings. Only after seeing the multiple layers of seal placed over the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, which prevented crucial information from leaking out, did he heave a slight sigh of relief. Seeing how severe Jiang Fangyu's attitude was, the faces of Ren Shi and the others turned grim as well. I believe that the Master-Teacher Pavilion is aware that ever since the fall of the otherworldly demon emperor, whose strength was so great that he could oppose even Kong Shi directly, the otherworldly demonic tribe has been under the control of 3 apex experts. Jiang Fangyu said. They are Sovereign Chen Yong, Sovereign Chen Xing, and Sovereign Chen Ling, right? Sovereign Chen Yong takes on the leading role, whereas Sovereign Chen Xing and Sovereign Chen Ling assume auxiliary roles. However, the 3 of them have never been on close terms, and they are extremely wary of one another. It's due to their disharmony with one another that they have never been able to launch a decisive assault on mankind. Or else even the Master-Teacher Pavilion would have been troubled fending them off. Ren Shi nodded. This was extremely confidential intelligence, but there was no way that the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters could have been oblivious to it. Indeed, those 3 sovereigns had been keeping each other in check all this while. However, earlier this afternoon, I received news that Sovereign Chen Xing and Sovereign Chen Ling have proclaimed an alliance with one another. Jiang Fangyu's face darkened. Alliance. Ren Qingyuan was alarmed by the news. Based on what I've heard, it seems like the 2 sovereigns have amassed 100,000-man-strong army. If they follow through with the alliance, it's likely that we might face a major invasion soon. If the intelligence I have received is true, the location will be the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters subterranean gallery. Jiang Fangyu said grimly. Most of the sempiternal realm grand elders of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters have already gone to the Temple of Confucius, and our master teachers are spread across the many subterranean galleries throughout the Master-Teacher continent. Even if we attempt to gather them now, they won't be able to make it back here in time. We could use teleportation formations to get some of them over, but most of them are too weak to withstand the spatial turbulence. Ren Qingyuan said with a deep frown. If Jiang Fangyu's intelligence was true, mankind was truly in huge danger this time around. Even he was unable to think of a feasible solution to resolve this issue at the moment. I know that this matter concerns the survival of mankind. So Brother Luo and I have brought the elites of the Jiang clan and the Luo clan over so as to aid the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters in the defense of its subterranean gallery. Jiang Fangyu said, Allow me thank you on behalf of mankind, Brother Jiang. Given that a full-blown invasion by the otherworldly demonic tribe lies just ahead of us, we have no time to lose. Let's head down to the subterranean gallery right away and discuss our battle plans on the way there. I fear that they will begin on their assault before we manage to get anything concrete out. Without any hesitation, Ren Qingyuan and the others quickly made their way over to the subterranean gallery beneath the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters. Just like the Zhang clan's Dracatiger Mountain subterranean gallery, there was a massive fortress behind the spatial seal to serve as the last line of defense against the otherworldly demons. Unless the otherworldly demons breached the fortress, they would never be able to step foot on the Master-Teacher continent. What is the situation on the other side? Ren Qingyuan quickly landed on the sentry post and questioned the 9-star Master Teacher standing guard there. There have been no movements from the otherworldly demonic tribe since a while ago. We have just received word from our scouts that their soldiers have retreated through the spatial seal, seemingly planning something. As the killing intent lingering in the otherworldly battlefield affects one's rationality, they didn't dare advance too deep. As such, they aren't certain about the exact situation either. The 9-star Master Teacher reported. I see. Ren Qingyuan nodded. A crimson moon loomed over the otherworldly battlefield where the otherworldly demonic tribe resided, causing concentrated killing intent to linger in the area. If normal master teachers entered the otherworldly battlefield recklessly, it would not be too long before their rationality was corroded by the killing intent, turning them into machines who knew nothing more than slaughter. It was for this reason that mankind had chosen to maintain a defensive stance against the otherworldly demonic tribe over the past tens of thousands of years. It was not because they did not want to eradicate the otherworldly demonic tribe once and for all, but they were not able to do so. Otherwise, given the countless experts within the ranks of the Master-Teacher Pavilion over the past tens of thousands of years, there was no reason for them to give the otherworldly demonic tribe a breather and allow them to recover from the severe blow that they had suffered during Kong Shi's era. Jiang Fengyu pondered for a moment before saying, "It isn't a solution to continue waiting here blindly either. I'll head over there to check on the situation personally. We need more intelligence to prepare for what is to come." The otherworldly demonic tribe usually neglect to guard their borders of the spatial seal, so I should be able to sneak in without alarming them. "Brother Jiang, allow me to go with you." Luo Ganzhen stepped forward. "I have recently made some advancements in my comprehension of space. As long as the opponent's cultivation isn't above mine, I will be able to conceal us easily from the gazes of any otherworldly demon." This, Ren Qingyuan hesitated for a moment before turning around to the 9-star master teacher to instruct, "Organize our forces and have them prepare themselves for battle at any moment. I'll head over to the otherworldly battlefield to check on the situation with Brother Jiang and Brother Luo." Since the scouts were unable to advance too deeply into the otherworldly battlefield, the information that they could acquire was limited. It would be better for him to make a move personally. "Deputy Pavilion Master, you mustn't. It's too dangerous." Many 9-star master teachers attempted to dissuade Ren Qingyuan from making this move. "Don't worry, I'm only going there to do some scouting. With Brother Luo and Brother Jiang around, we won't face too much trouble." Ren Qingyuan interrupted the crowd to appease them. Seeing that Ren Qingyuan was determined, the crowd knew that it would be futile to attempt to change his mind. They could only sigh deeply and fall silent. As this matter was of the utmost urgency, the trio quickly hid their figures and advanced forward. It did not take them too long to arrive before the spatial seal. Just as the 9-star master teacher earlier had said, the otherworldly demons did not put up too much defense. The soldiers left behind to guard the area were not very strong. The group of 3 was able to bypass them with ease. As soon as they entered the otherworldly battlefield, they felt an intense wave of killing intent gushing toward them. Even with their level of cultivation, they were still unable to prevent such overwhelming killing intent from seeping into their body. Thus, they could only hasten their movements. "I feel great disturbances in the flow of spiritual energy over there. Let's head that way to take a look." After flying briefly, the group of 3 felt something that could be described as a raging storm of spiritual energy coming from a certain direction. They traded gazes with one another and swiftly proceeded over. Before arriving in the area, they made sure to conceal their figures entirely and proceed with full wariness. They feared that the slightest ripple that they made in their surroundings would betray their presence to the enemy. It was not easy for them to arrive in the vicinity of the disturbances. Standing at the peak of a mountain, Ren Qingyuan glanced down at the valley before him, and his figure jolted in astonishment. Seeing Ren Qingyuan's state, Jiang Fengyu frowned in bewilderment. "What's wrong? Take a look at it yourself," Ren Qingyuan remarked with trembling lips. Luo Ganzhen and Jiang Fengyu were perplexed. They quickly glanced downward as well, and in the blink of an eye, their eyes were bulging, and their mouths were agape. These otherworldly demons are all dead. The valley before them was filled with countless otherworldly demon corpses. They piled up on one another like many hills in the midst of the valley, forming a rather gruesome sight. This could probably only be described as a sea of corpses. They had been worried about an invasion by the otherworldly demons, and were frantically preparing in place many countermeasures to deal with them. Yet, before these otherworldly demons had even gotten beyond the spatial seal, They had already been completely wiped out. What in the world was happening? Let's head over to take a look. Since the otherworldly demons were already dead, there was nothing for them to fear. Thus, they hurriedly made their ways over. They quickly flew into the valley and swept across the corpses. Analyzing the traces around them, Jiang Fengyu remarked in astonishment, "This should be the encampment for the allied soldiers of Sovereign Chen Xing and Sovereign Chen Ling. From the looks of it, it seems like they died from fighting one another." The soul oracles hidden amid the otherworldly demonic tribe had secretly sent a message to inform him of the alliance between the two sovereigns. There was no doubt that such an alliance posed a major threat to mankind, so it was of the utmost importance for mankind to make preparations beforehand. After learning of this news, Jiang Fengyu had been plagued with worry. He had trembled just thinking of what would become of mankind if they failed to fend off the otherworldly demons. But before the enemy even appeared, they had already all been killed. The hell? What the heck is going on here? Can anyone explain the situation to me? Could it be that the two sovereigns had a falling out over the alliance and came to a fight as a result, thus causing the entire allied army to be wiped out? Luo Ganzhen asked. It was an extremely ludicrous reason, but he could not think of any alternative ways to explain this matter. Even if the two sovereigns turned against one another, causing a battle to break out between the two factions, it's impossible for the entire army to be wiped out like that. Someone must have gone around killing all of the survivors. Furthermore, don't you think that there's a striking similarity among how they died? The 1,000 otherworldly demons over here have all been crushed flat by some immense force. The 1,000 otherworldly demons over there had their hearts impaled, and the 1,000 otherworldly demons there had their heads lopped off. Ren Qingyuan shook his head and rejected Luo Ganzhen's hypothesis. As a 9-star master teacher, he was extremely sharp in his observation and analysis. From the traces left behind, he could tell that not a single otherworldly demon of the army of 100,000 had escaped alive from this battle. If the factions of the two sovereigns were equally matched, it was possible for the war to end with many deaths. However, without the involvement of any external powers, it was impossible for all of them to die off so cleanly. Pavilion Master Ren is right. Not only so, the equipment and resources of the otherworldly demons have also vanished without a trace. I can't see a single storage ring around. Without a doubt, someone must have plundered them. Jiang Fengyu added, "Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting." Hearing those words, Luo Ganzhen swiftly swept his gaze over the countless otherworldly demons around, only to see their empty fingers. There really was not a single storage ring to be seen. Furthermore, even though most of the tents had been burned down to cinders, there were no military supplies to be seen. How could such a large army have no military supplies at all? There was only a single explanation for such a sight. A third party had been there. Chances were that this massacre had been orchestrated by the third party. However, who in the world had the ability to destroy 100,000 otherworldly demon-strong army in less than a day? Who? At this moment, a sharp sound of wind could be heard from the distance, following which, a figure appeared above the mountain valley that they were in. In response to the sudden arrival of the figure, Ren Qingyuan and the others immediately raised their guard and whipped out their weapons. Just as they were about to attack the figure, they got a clear look of the other party. Ren Qingyuan widened his eyes in astonishment and exclaimed, "It's Luo Shi." Jiang Fengyu and Luo Ganzhen also recognized the figure in the sky. They had seen Luo Ruoxin during the engagement ceremony. Given her outstanding disposition and appearance, there was no way that they could mistake her for someone else. Just that, why would she suddenly appear here? Did she not head to the Zhang clan together with Zhang Xian to guard the Drakatiger Mountain subterranean gallery? Could she be an otherworldly demon? Luo Ganzhen's eyebrows shot up as an air of hostility burst forth from him. Even though he had already acknowledged Zhang Xian as the new head of the Luo clan, he still could not bring himself to forgive Luo Ruoxin for intruding on the engagement ceremony back then and injuring the elders of the Luo clan. He had attempted to investigate Luo Ruoxin's background afterward, but it seemed as though the latter had appeared out of nowhere. Even the Luo clan's formidable intelligence network was not able to gather any information on Luo Ruoxin at all. For someone as powerful as Luo Ruoxin to suddenly appear without any prior signs, it was really hard not to doubt her identity. Hearing those words, the two of them turned their gazes over and saw Luo Ruoxin. There were no peculiar emotions on her face as she looked upon the heaps of corpses strewn across the area. Instead, she was looking around, seemingly trying to find something. If that's truly the case, Ren Qingyuan remarked with a frown, I doubt that she would have been able to remain so calm after seeing the deaths of so many of her tribesmen. That was 100,000 otherworldly demons they were talking about. The death of so many elites was already enough to shake the foundations of the otherworldly demonic tribe. If Luo Ruoxin was truly an otherworldly demon, she should have shown some kind of reaction to the slaughter that had happened. The fact that she was able to remain impassive despite such huge losses likely suggested that she was not affiliated with the otherworldly demonic tribe. Ren Shi, clan head Luo and clan head Jiang, have you seen Zhang Xian? While the three of them were discussing the matter telepathically, Luo Ruoxin had also noticed them, and she clasped her fist. Zhang Xian? Is Zhang Shi here as well? Ren Qingyuan was taken aback by that question. After they parted from one another the day before, Zhang Shi had immediately rushed back to the Zhang clan. It did not seem logical for Luo Ruoxin to be looking for him here, in the otherworldly battlefield. Yesterday, Zhang Xian single-handedly resolved the crisis in the Dracatiger Mountain subterranean gallery before entering the otherworldly battlefield. I had to search for quite a while before tracking him here, Luo Ruoxin explained. I heard about the situation at the Dracatiger Mountain subterranean gallery. If I'm not mistaken, there are 10,000 otherworldly demons stationed there, right? What do you mean by Zhang Shi single-handedly resolved the crisis? Jiang Fangyu asked doubtfully. The members of the Jiang clan had been dispatched to reinforce the Zhang clan's Dracatiger Mountain subterranean gallery and the Luo clan's Starcluster subterranean gallery. As one of the 6 largest subterranean galleries on the Master Teacher continent, the Dracatiger Mountain subterranean gallery was one of the major targets of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Given the scale of the invasion this time around, its security could be said to be shaky even when it was guarded by the powerful Zhang clan. Yet, Zhang Xian had actually resolved the crisis single-handedly. How was that possible? Yes, there were 10,000 otherworldly demons stationed then. Yesterday, Zhang Xian said that he would head over to scout the situation, but he ended up killing them all. By the time we noticed it, he had already entered the otherworldly battlefield, Luo Ruoxin explained. He ended up killing 10,000 otherworldly demons while trying to scout the situation? Are you sure you aren't pulling our legs? The trio felt their hair standing on end. Having clashed with the otherworldly demonic tribe many times, they were well aware of the fighting prowess and capabilities of the otherworldly demons. Even an average ancient sage would have trouble dealing with 10,000 otherworldly demon soldiers. Yet to actually wipe such an army out while scouting, was that for real? Indeed. In fact, the 100,000 otherworldly demons here were likely killed by him. Just that. Where is he? The 3 of you arrived earlier. Did you notice anything? Luo Ruoxin asked. She had been together with Zhang Xian for the past few days, so she was well aware of the means he possessed. She had seen the corpses that Ren Qingyuan had pointed out earlier, and she recognized them to be the doing of the Golden Origin Cauldron and the Dragonbone Divine Spear. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. The only problem was that Zhang Xian was nowhere to be seen. Since the 3 of them had arrived earlier, could they have found anything? You are saying that Zhang Xian single-handedly wiped out an army of 100,000 otherworldly demons. No, that's not right. If we count the otherworldly demons from the Dracatiger Mountain subterranean gallery, that would be 110,000 otherworldly demons. In other words, he resolved the major threat to the Master Teacher continent by himself? The trio felt their heads spinning dizzily around them. All they had just heard was simply so inconceivable that it threatened to tear down everything that they had known about the world. Was this for real? 110,000 otherworldly demons of Saint 3 Dan. And above was a force that even the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters would struggle to face. Even if the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters successfully rallied all of the forces at its disposal, it would have only ended in a narrow victory on their side. Yet, the other party had actually resolved the crisis single-handedly. How in the world did he do it? Not even Kong Shi had achieved such spectacular accomplishments in his time. Ren Qingyuan took a deep breath and calmed his shock before replying Luo Ruoxin's question. Luo Shi, we arrived moments before you, and we didn't see Zhang Shi anywhere. Before he could finish his piece, the air above suddenly turned turbulent. He hurriedly raised his head and saw large swathes of ominous clouds swiftly congregating together. It's a cultivation ordeal, Ren Qingyuan exclaimed in astonishment. Unknowingly, a figure suddenly appeared in the sky, floating quietly beneath the congregation of ominous clouds. Pitch-black flames rumbled amid the clouds above him, turning the surrounding air incredibly dry. The temperature swiftly surged with a momentum that felt as though it would melt the entire sky. It's the heavenly flame tribulation. Luo Ganzhen and Jiang Fangyu gulped. A day earlier, when they met with Zhang Shi, he had still been at Saint 9 Dan Pinnacle. Yet, within such a short span of time, not only had he achieved a breakthrough to Great Sage 1 Dan Introspective Convalescence Realm, he was even fast on his way to advancing toward the Aureate Body Realm. How in the world did he cultivate so quickly? Any other cultivator would require several years of effort before they were ready to push for a major breakthrough in their cultivation. But to the fellow in the sky, it seemed like nothing more than child's play. More importantly, he even had the spare time to kill 110,000 otherworldly demons and many sempiternal realm commanders. You are all here. While the crowd was overwhelmed with utter shock, Zhang Xian also caught sight of them and flashed them a smile. Give me a moment. Let's talk after I overcome the heavenly flame tribulation. After saying those words, he dived right into the congregation of ominous clouds. Is he going to use the same tactic for the heavenly flame tribulation? Luo Ganzhen's body staggered a little upon seeing that sight. He had heard stories about how Zhang Xian overcame his lightning tribulation. But there was a huge difference between lightning tribulations and heavenly flame tribulations. To dive right into the source of flames, was he not afraid of being reduced to cinders? More importantly, what was with that relaxed expression on his face? Are you that confident that you will be able to get through such a powerful tribulation safely? This, catching sight of Luo Ganzhen's astonishment, Ren Qingyuan shook his head and explained, Zhang Shi should be fine. He overcame the heavenly flame tribulation back in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters yesterday. He has already overcome it. Luo Ganzhen exclaimed in bewilderment upon hearing those words. Each cultivator will only face the heavenly flame tribulation once in their life at most, right? Why is he facing it a second time? The heavenly flame tribulation was a cultivation ordeal that one had to overcome when achieving a breakthrough to the Aureate Body Realm. Each great sage would only face it once in their cultivation journey. It was unthinkable for anyone to have to face it twice. I'm not too sure what's going on either. In any case, it's a fact that he did face the heavenly flame tribulation in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters just a day ago, and he survived the ordeal by diving right into the clouds as well. I don't think he will face any problems now, Ren Qingyuan replied. That's not right. Ren Shi, Zhang Shi came to our Jiang clan 2 days ago and underwent the heavenly flame tribulation then as well. But you are saying that he has faced the heavenly flame tribulation at the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters as well. Jiang Fangyu asked doubtfully, You are telling me that it's his third time facing the heavenly flame tribulation? Luo Ganzhen nearly fainted on the spot. That was the heavenly flame tribulation, a force that no cultivator would not fear. To face it again and again, it was as if the heavenly flame tribulation was a sparring partner that he could challenge as and when he liked. Other cultivators would take their time to write their last will before facing the heavenly flame tribulation, knowing that there was a real possibility that they would lose their life in the cultivation ordeal. Yet this fellow dived into it again and again, as if he was enjoying a hot spring, going at it the day before yesterday, and today. Is it really all right to toy with the powers of the heavens like that? While other cultivators had to put their lives survive cultivation ordeals, when it came to Zhang Xian, it felt like he was going on a leisurely tour instead. And in truth, the ones who were surprised were not only Luo Ganzhen and the others. The heavenly flame in the sky was stupefied as well. Freak, it's this fellow. Freaking hell, it's this fellow again. Holy freaking hell, why the heck is it this fellow again? Bro, can't you just allow me to rest for a day? You are making me work overtime day after day. Can't you have some sympathy for me? I already ran to the otherworldly battlefield in order to avoid you, but you still came chasing after me. The crowd could not make sense out of why Zhang Xian was able to challenge the heavenly flame tribulation thrice. And they could not comprehend why it was the Empyrean heavenly flame each and every time. Eventually, they could only give up on trying to understand this inconceivable phenomenon and focus their attention on watching the cultivation ordeal instead. Ferocious black flames billowed within the clouds in the sky. At the start, they had still been roaring fiendishly, as if they would bring utter annihilation upon the world. But as Zhang Xian dived in, the ominous clouds suddenly began shuddering and twitching. Even that feral roar seemed to have turned into helpless moans. By the 10-minute mark, the tribulation had already turned tail and fled, leaving a revitalized and satisfied Zhang Xian floating in the air. Modifying his dantian and altering his meridian network had taken quite a while, nearly an entire day, but its effects were remarkable. Otherwise, he would not have been able to push for a breakthrough to the Aureate body realm so quickly. With 2 prior experiences of dealing with the heavenly flame tribulation, he had opened up all of his acupoints and devoured the flames without any hesitation. With the augmentation of various cultivation resources, he had actually managed to advance to Aureate body realm consummation within a short 10 minutes. Driving his Jinqi, a golden sheen swiftly enveloped his body. It was as if an incarnation of Buddha had descended upon the world. After overcoming his heavenly flame tribulation, Zhang Xian descended to where the crowd was and asked, "Why are you all here?" Logically speaking, Luo Ganzhen, Jiang Fangyu, Ren Qingyuan, and Luo Ruoxin should have been in different subterranean galleries, fending off the invasion of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Why had they gathered in the otherworldly battlefield to watch his cultivation ordeal? We noticed some peculiar movements from the otherworldly demonic tribe, so we came over to scout the situation. Were you the one who killed these otherworldly demons? Even though Ren Qingyuan had vaguely guessed the story, he still found it hard to believe that something like this was possible. Thus, he pointed to the heaps of corpses scattered around. Oh, when I first arrived, these scoundrels were planning to launch a decisive invasion on the Master-Teacher continent. In order to stop them, I played on the tension between the 2 factions that made up the army and stoked them into fighting against one another. Fortunately, everything went according to plan. Zhang Xian said, the desire for slaughter could be said to be coded into the genes of the otherworldly demonic tribe. If they entered the Master-Teacher continent, many innocent humans would surely be killed under their barbarity. It did weigh on Zhang Xian's heart to claim so many lives callously, but he felt that it was necessary. Benevolence toward the enemy in war was no different from malevolence toward one's allies. You were able to make the 2 factions come to blows with one another? The lips of Ren Qingyuan and the others twitched as they listened to Zhang Xian's story. While the latter had phrased it very casually, they understood the difficulties in trying to pull something like this off. The otherworldly demons were not mindless creatures of power. They were shrewd as well, which made them particularly difficult opponents to deal with. Otherwise, the Master-Teacher Pavilion would not have had so much trouble trying to deal with them. It must have taken you quite a bit of effort to turn them against one another. Ren Qingyuan remarked. You're right, it took me 1 whole hour to do so. I'm feeling really beat now. Zhang Xian nodded. He had needed to switch between multiple identities again and again, which was truly no easy feat even with his strength. He could not help but feel completely drained by the time he managed to pull everything off. It had indeed been rather difficult on him. An hour. Ren Qingyuan and the others suddenly felt utter helplessness weighing down on them. If they had been in Zhang Xian's shoes, it would have cost them much more in order to deepen the tension between the two factions and force them to clash with one another. At the very least, it would have taken them years of careful preparation. Yet that fellow only took an hour. The more they talked to the other party, the more stifled they felt on the inside. Can you go easier on our hearts? There should have been several dozen sempiternal realm commanders within this army of 100,000, right? Did you kill them as well? Jiang Fengyu asked. I did. It took me a while, but I managed to assassinate all of them. Zhang Xian nodded earnestly. I ended up staining my armor in order to do so. In order to make his disguise more lifelike, he had cleaned his dirted armor over and over again. By now, his armor was already completely soaked in blood, such that no amount of wiping would be able to get the blood out of it. Jiang Fengyu felt suffocated. Even Yang Shi would be forced to flee as far as he could when faced with several dozen sempiternal realm cultivators. Yet, you actually managed to assassinate all of them without sustaining any major injuries. And you are even complaining about how they stained your clothes. All of a sudden, Jiang Fengyu could not help but feel a little bit of pity for the otherworldly demon experts who had died at Zhang Xian's hand. An imposing palace towered in the depths of the otherworldly battlefield, far away from where Zhang Xian and the others were. Two middle-aged men were seated opposite one another with wine cups in their hands. The middle-aged man seated on the left wore a flowing golden robe. With a hearty laugh, he raised his cup and said, "A toast to our alliance. May our tribesmen reclaim the land that belongs to us." He was one of the three sovereigns of the otherworldly demonic tribe, Sovereign Chunling. Opposite to him was a middle-aged man dressed in a long, violet robe, Sovereign Chunxing. May your words come to be. Sovereign Chunxing nodded in a dignified manner as he sipped on the wine, savoring its deep fragrance. He had to admit that the wine prepared by Sovereign Chunling was truly fine. Even as one of the sovereigns, it was not a flavor that he could taste too often. Rest assured, there's no way the humans stand a chance against our allied army. Once this matter comes to be, mankind will no longer pose a threat to us. We shall return to our land of prosperity and bring our otherworldly demonic tribe to greatness once more. Sovereign Qinling roared joyfully. However, the next instant his expression froze, and it slowly turned into a frown. Without any warning, he dashed out of the room. Noting Sovereign Chunling's queer movements, Sovereign Chunxing realized that something major must have happened as well. Thus, he quickly left the room and followed Sovereign Chunling. Before long, the two of them arrived before a vast altar. Countless jade tokens floated in the air above the vast altar. It was a tradition of the otherworldly demonic tribe to extract a sliver of each soldier's will and forge it into a jade token before the army departed for battle. This jade token indicated the condition of the individual. If a jade token shattered, it meant that the individual had already breathed his last breath. This served as an effective method for the sovereigns to gauge the status of the army and family members of the soldiers, to keep track of the condition of their loved ones. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Whenever a major battle broke out, the jade tokens would swiftly shatter one after another. This would mean that the brave soldiers of the otherworldly demonic tribe were laying down their bodies and souls to further the cause of their tribe. These men would be regarded as heroes, and they would be honored for their valiance. Their deeds would go down in history, and their name tablets would be placed on the god's altar. By the time that the two sovereigns had arrived before the altar, the jade tokens had already begun shattering one after another. As beings who stood at the very top of the otherworldly demonic tribe, they had already seen their fair share of deaths. If it had just been a normal battle, such a shattering of jade tokens would not have even fazed them. However, pipapa, pipapa, pipa pipapa, the jade tokens shattered with beautiful rhythm, reminiscent of an orchestral performance. It was baffling to think of it in such a manner, but there was a mysterious charm to the melody. From time to time, As if the melody struck a climax, there would be an extraordinarily powerful note that played on the heartstrings of the listeners. Within the short span of a few minutes, the 100,000 jade tokens floating above the altar had been reduced to a pile of dust on the ground. Nothing was left at all. Our army of 100,000. Sovereign Chunling staggered weakly as the wine cup in his hand fell to the ground. His face paled in disbelief as he shook his head in incredulity. An army of 100,000 elites should have been sufficient to push their way through the subterranean gallery and bring havoc upon the master-teacher continent. They had expected great casualties in the midst of doing so, but they were confident that victory was in their grasp. Yet, barely after they had confirmed their alliance, before their allied army could even make their way out of the subterranean gallery, it had already been wiped out. For the jade tokens to shatter one another so determinately and relentlessly, what in the world was going on? In an instant, the two sovereigns were left completely stunned. It had not been easy for the two of them to put aside their differences and form an alliance. But everything had fallen apart before they could do anything at all. What was even worse was that they did not know who the culprit was. I can't accept this. I'll go take a look personally. Unable to hold back his rage, a cataclysmic aura burst forth from Sovereign Chunling, causing the surrounding space to shatter. He was an ancient sage expert. I'll follow you, Sovereign Chunxing spat coldly. Half of the casualties had been his subordinates. There was no way that he could let the matter slide so easily. Let's head out together then. While we're at it, we should settle that matter as well. Otherwise, we'll be forced to remain subservient to that man for the rest of our lives. Sovereign Chunling said as a sharp glint flashed across his eyes. Sovereign Chunxing nodded. I heard that Sovereign Chunyong has recently taken in an extraordinarily talented young man. That brat seems to know no bottleneck at all. His cultivation advances at a breakneck speed. None of our disciples are a match for him. If we allow Brat to continue growing at this rate, we'll soon lose what should have belonged to us. Don't touch that brat for the time being, Sovereign Chunling said. He has received the acknowledgement of vicious will, and he practices the highest cultivation technique of our otherworldly demonic tribe. Given the prestige that he enjoys at the moment, we can't afford to touch him. However, once that matter comes to be, that brat will lose all his support. Then we can slowly grind him down. Perhaps, we might even be able to attain the highest cultivation technique. You're right. Let's do it then. Sovereign Chunxing nodded before falling silent. With a jolt, the two middle-aged men vanished from the spot. It seemed like they had torn through the restraints of space to head to an unknown place. You said that an army of 100,000 otherworldly demons has been eradicated by clan head Zhang single-handedly? Is such a thing even possible? I heard it from Rensher personally, so there's no doubt about the authenticity of the news. Even so, I still find the matter really hard to believe. Since the threat of the otherworldly demonic tribe's invasion has been resolved, we don't have to be stationed in the subterranean gallery anymore. After overcoming the heavenly flame tribulation, Zhang Xian had advanced tremendously in his cultivation once more. Since there was no need for him to remain in the area, he had swiftly left together with Ren Qingyuan and the others. It did not take long for the news that the threat of the otherworldly demonic tribe had been resolved by a single young man to reach the defensive forces guarding the 108 subterranean galleries. Everyone was astounded. There was no lack of talents in the history of the master-teacher continent. Many brave and powerful men had left behind legends that resounded in the ears of the populace, even to this day. Yet, compared to the feat achieved by this single young man, those legends were not even worth mentioning. To single-handedly annihilate 110,000 otherworldly demons and several dozen sempiternal realm experts. The more they thought about the matter, the more frenzied they became. They could not help but pinch themselves to check if they were dreaming. Oblivious to the uproar that he had caused, at this very moment, Zhang Xian had already returned to the Zhang clan. With the major setbacks suffered by the otherworldly demonic tribe, it's unlikely that they will be able to amass the forces required to launch another invasion within a short period of time. Let's head to the Temple of Confucius together. We'll need to assemble a team to go along with us." After hearing the happenings in the otherworldly battlefield from his son, Sword Saint Xing was unable to close his mouth for a very long time. "All right," Zhang Xian nodded. There was no doubt that the otherworldly demonic tribe had suffered a huge loss. Even if they attempted to amass their troops once more and launch another invasion, it was unlikely that they would be able to pose much of a threat. Thus, what they should focus their attention on at the moment was the Temple of Confucius. Given that its opening was just around the corner, they should make their way over very soon. If they arrived late, the Great Codex of Spring and Autumn could very well fall into the hands of the otherworldly demonic tribe, or the 100 schools of philosophers. This would be bad news for the 3 premier clans and the Master Teacher Pavilion. The Temple of Confucius is located in Xiufu. The space in Xiufu is folded and distorted, so it would be unsafe to head over through spatial teleportation. We should teleport to somewhere nearby before flying over. We'll head there first as the advance party to scout the situation there. Elder Wuyan, I'll leave it to you to pick out the clan members for this expedition and bring them over. Make sure to contact us as soon as you arrive," Sword Saint Xing instructed. After First Elder Zhang Wuheng was punished for plotting against the incumbent clan head, Elder Wuyan had taken over his responsibilities. Also, inform the Grand Elders who are in seclusion to hurry over as well. The Temple of Confucius will likely be their best shot at overcoming their current bottlenecks. Similar to the Master Teacher Pavilion, the Zhang clan had many Grand Elders in seclusion as well. Unless the Zhang clan was forced into a desperate position, they would never make a move. Their cultivation had all reached Great Sage for Dan Sempiternal Realm. Unless ancient sages made a move, they could be considered as the top experts of the Master Teacher continent. Find authorized novels in Webnovel Faster Updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. It was unfortunate that they were not able to find a way to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage, so they could only go into hibernation to lengthen their lifespan as long as possible. There was much more to the Temple of Confucius than just the Great Codex of Spring and Autumn. It was not a coincidence that no one had been able to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage for the past 10,000 years. Perhaps the secret behind overcoming this bottleneck was hidden there as well. Regardless of whether that was true or not, they would have to make a trip there to find out for themselves. Currently, the Zhang clan only had one ancient sage left. Once that ancient sage came to the end of his lifespan, without any other ancient sages to support the Zhang clan, it would swiftly fall from the top echelons of the Master Teacher continent. "I understand," Elder Wuyan nodded. After making arrangements, Sword Saint Xing said, "Let's head over now." Zhang Xian took out the Dragonbone Divine Spear and slid a dimension rift in front of him. A passageway swiftly formed in the dimension rift under his manipulation, and the crowd made their way over. With his Jinqi cultivation reaching Aurate Body Realm consummation, Zhang Xian's fighting prowess had reached greater heights. Even without resorting to schemes, he was already able to face sempiternal realm consummation experts like Wuxia in a direct confrontation, and even win. In truth, he had been intending to push his Jinqi cultivation straight up to the intuitive impulse realm, but he had found that he was unable to do so at all. The intuitive impulse realm allowed one to peer into the fortune of the world and consciously avert danger. However, such an ability was essentially peering into the secrets of the heavens as well, albeit to a lesser extent than that of seers. As one who possessed the library of Heaven's Path, attempts to do so would only end in his electrocution. He had secretly tried it a few times, and each and every time, he had ended up with a numbingly refreshing electric massage. Seeing that it was futile, he could only give up on the idea. From the looks of it, he could not follow the conventional path that all cultivators would tread on. He would have to find his own way forward. By the time they arrived at the other end of the passageway, they were already in close proximity to Xiufu. They quickly began making their way over toward the Temple of Confucius, when a figure suddenly approached them. It was Wu Chun. He had previously separated from them, saying that he had matters to attend to. Wu Chun first greeted Luo Ruoxin with a bow before turning to look at Zhang Xian. It could have just been Zhang Xian's imagination, but he seemed to sense some conflicting emotions in the depths of Wu Chen's eyes. "Have you settled your affairs?" Zhang Xian asked. All this time, he could feel that there was some kind of issue plaguing Wu Chen, leaving him in a heavy mood. Even as he followed Luo Ruoxin around, there was still a brooding atmosphere to him. However, the brooding atmosphere around him seemed to have vanished, which suggested that the matter had already been resolved. Hearing Zhang Xian's question, Wu Chen snapped out of his contemplation and replied with a slight smile. "Thanks to your grace, it has been resolved without a hitch." "That's a relief." Zhang Xian nodded. He knew that Wu Chen was unwilling to talk too much about his private matters, so he did not press on. Before long, they were back on their way to Ciufu. From where they were at, they were not too far away from their destination. The closer they got to Ciufu, the greater the pressure exerted on them from the second sun in the sky. It was not as searing as the real sun, but the pressure that it emanated seemed to weigh directly on one's soul. To construct such a massive ancient domain in the midst of the sky, and conceal it even from the detection of ancient sages, this was no longer the work of a man, but a miracle created by a higher power. As expected of the world's teacher, Wu Chen remarked in awe. Kong Shi is known not just for his unparalleled fighting prowess, but his astounding intelligence as well. He played a huge role in constructing a systematic lineage for the inheritance of numerous occupations. Of the lower, middle, and upper 9 paths, he organized no less than 20 occupations. Sword Saint Xing explained with an excited gleam in his eyes. The lineage of master teachers originated from Kong Shi. There was no master teacher in the world who was not filled with awe and respect for Kong Shi. Zhang Xian did not participate in the conversation with the rest of the crowd. Instead, he stared into the massive temple sealed within the sun, as a hint of bewilderment seeped into his eyes. For some reason, he could feel something within beckoning him. As if resonating with this beckoning, the library of Heaven's path trembled lightly, and the countless books stored within shook along with its movements. Is there an artifact in the Temple of Confucius that could upgrade the Library of Heaven's Path? Zhang Xian wondered with a frown. The Library of Heaven's Path had always maintained a state of impassiveness to whatever happened around him. Rarely did it move of its own accord. Yet at this moment it was shaking nonstop. It had not been this excited even when he paid a visit to the Seer Guild before. Could it be that there was something that the Library of Heaven's Path desired in the Temple of Confucius? If that was the case, he would have to make sure to acquire it. The reason he had been able to advance from a nameless nobody to an esteemed expert whom no one did not know of was not because of his astounding talent, high morals, or extreme diligence. Rather, it was due to the Library of Heaven's Path. If not for the Library of Heaven's Path, it was likely that he would still have been struggling in the Tianxian Kingdom, attempting to push for a breakthrough to become a one-star master teacher. Without a doubt, the Library of Heaven's Path was his greatest asset and trump card. No matter what dangers he would have to face, it would all be worth it if he could upgrade it further. He activated his Eye of Insight in an attempt to peer into the sun. However, despite having flown several hundred li into Ciufu, he was still unable to look into the depths of the Temple of Confucius. There seemed to be some kind of veil covering the temple, obscuring it from sight. The Temple of Confucius is located in a folded space. Until it's completely opened, not even ancient sages will be able to reach it even if they fly for over a decade, Luo Ruoxin explained. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Zhang Xian widened his eyes in astonishment. In a sense, this was similar to how the sun was in his previous life. It seemed to hang directly above Earth, creating an illusion that it could be easily reached as long as one flew into the sky. But in truth, even if one moved at the speed of light, it would still take 8 minutes in order to reach the sun. If we can still see it even from such a long distance away, how big must the Temple of Confucius be? Zhang Xian could not help but voice the question on his mind. The reason that was the case for the sun was simply because of its massive scale. If it was the same for the Temple of Confucius as well, could it actually be a gigantic world of its own? The Temple of Confucius isn't too big. It's a type of spatial manipulation. In truth, it isn't that far away from us, Luo Ruoxin replied. It seemed like she had quite a deep understanding of the Temple of Confucius. While they were chatting with one another, an ancient city soon came into view. The crowd quickly made their way over. The land where the Temple of Confucius was located, Xiufu. This city was not as prosperous or massive as the Empire Alliance, and most of the buildings were ancient and decrepit. However, it had a quiet and peaceful aura, giving rise to a comfortable atmosphere. If one had to describe it, it would be reminiscent of an infant returning to a mother's embrace. This is the unique aura of a celestial master teacher? Zhang Xian's eyes shot up in astonishment. The aura looming in the city was extremely similar to the aura that seeped into his body during the acknowledgement of celestial master teacher. The only difference was that the concentration was many times lower. There are seemingly intangible forces that manifest in mysterious ways in the world. There is an academic aura for the academics and martial aura for martial arts. These two forces are derived from the unique culture of education and lineages on the master-teacher continent, and we collectively refer to them as teacher's milieu. If one comes into prolonged contact with teacher's milieu, one's state of mind will mature swiftly. One's thoughts will become more open and discerning, thus leaving little room for inner demons and irrationality to exist. Sword Saint Xing explained. Teacher's milieu? Zhang Xian repeated those two words before nodding slightly. In truth, this unique aura was not exclusive to celestial master teachers. When a master teacher paid respects to the predecessors in the teacher acknowledgement hall, they could be bestowed with this aura as well. In a sense, it was a symbolism of culture. It was through the milieu of a teacher that master teachers were able to win the respect of the world and become the leaders of the world. Has this place always been like that? Zhang Xian asked. He focused his attention on the teacher's milieu around him, and just as Sword Saint Xing had said, the aura was indeed able to bring greater sharpness and acuity to his mind. At the same time, this sparked some doubts in his mind. The effects of the teacher's milieu were astounding, such that even the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters was unable to compete with it. Seeing through Zhang Xian's doubt, Sword Saint Xing explained, before the opening of the Temple of Confucius, while teacher's milieu still lingered in Xiufu, it was far sparser than what you can perceive right now. Nevertheless, its enhancement to one's state of mind was still rather conspicuous if one lived in the area for prolonged periods of time. Due to that, Xiufu is also known as the ancestral land of the master teachers. Most 9-star master teachers reside in Xiufu for a period of their life, not to cultivate or go into seclusion, but to experience the life of a mortal and temper their state of mind. Take a look at that carpenter over there. Do you notice anything different about him? Zhang Xian turned his gaze over. By the side of a street, there was a carpenter who was in the midst of crafting a piece of furniture. The movements of his calloused hands were extremely precise, as if they had been carefully measured by a ruler. Wooden shavings flew around the place. Before long, a completed product was sitting right before him. He is a 9-star master teacher. Zhang Xian was astounded by what he saw. The carpenter shaved the wood with light strokes that seemed to be devoid of strength, and there was not the slightest hint of junqi that could be felt flowing through his body. However, the ocean-like accumulation of energy that Zhang Xian could see in the depths of his dantian, through the eye of insight, told a very different story. Not only was the carpenter likely a 9-star master teacher, chances were that he was an extremely powerful one as well. Indeed, he's a 9-star master teacher who made his name 300 years ago. He was at Great Sage 2 Dan Oriat Body Realm back then, so there's no doubt that he has grown much stronger by now. Sword Saint Xing replied. An Oriat Body Realm cultivator doing carpentry? Zhang Xian could hardly believe what he was hearing. All along, he had thought that Great Sage experts were extremely rare among mankind. Yet, who could have thought that even a carpenter that he encountered on the street within Xiufu would have reached such a level as well? Look at the fishmonger and butcher over there as well. They were all renowned 9-star master teachers in their era. Back then, they still weren't too powerful, but over the years, they have reached Great Sage 3 Dan Intuitive Impulse realm as well. Just like me. Sword Saint Xing explained. If nothing had happened to you back then, your mother and I would have come to Tsiufu to try living an ordinary life as well. Through experiencing the difficulties of mortal life, we would have been able to temper our state of mind and ready ourselves for a breakthrough to higher realms. Zhang Xian nodded quietly in response. Just as Sword Saint Xing had said, a lot of the ordinary-looking individuals around them were astoundingly great sage experts. They were experts whose silhouettes could rarely be seen even within major clans. But in Tsiufu, they were as common as cabbage in a wet market. It was no wonder Tsiufu was known as the ancestral lands of the master teachers. It seemed like there was indeed a basis to it. Sword Saint Xing suddenly turned to look at Zhang Xian and asked curiously, "Right. Xianer, what's your soul depth at the moment? If you wish to advance your cultivation as a master teacher, raising your soul depth is of the utmost importance. If your soul depth isn't up to par, your heart won't be calm, and your will won't be pure. Pushing your cultivation ahead will become much harder and harder. As long as one had a high aptitude, sufficient cultivation resources, and a good teacher, one would be able to advance one's cultivation rather swiftly. However, tempering one's state of mind was a step-by-step process that could not be rushed. There was no way to forcefully hasten the process, and any attempts to do so would likely end up bad. His son was incredibly talented, but that did not change the fact that his son was only 20 this year. To become a 9-star master teacher at such an age, he could not help but wonder how high the soul depth of his son was, and how he had managed to raise it so quickly. My soul depth. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before replying honestly, 29. 1. Having undergone the 5th acknowledgement of Celestial Master Teacher, and stumbling across many fortuitous encounters, he had been able to raise his soul depth considerably swiftly. It did not take him long to reach a level comparable to 9-star pinnacle master teachers. Most likely, the only master teachers who could surpass him were Yangshi and a couple of others. 29-1? Hearing that number, Sword Saint Xing's lips twitched. He had thought that given how fast his son's cultivation had grown, his soul depth would have difficulties trying to catch up. Who would have thought that his son's soul depth was actually much higher than his? How did you cultivate your soul depth? Sword Saint Xing asked in astonishment. It should have been extremely difficult to raise one's soul depth. Even with the assistance of a cultivation technique, it still takes tremendous effort and time in order to do so. It was common knowledge that the greatest limiting factor to a master teacher was their soul depth. In order to experience the vicissitudes of life, Yangshi concealed his identity and wandered the world for many years before he managed to raise his soul depth so high. On the other hand, his son was only 20 this year, and he had spent his earlier 19 years in a place as remote as the Tianxian kingdom. How could his soul depth be so high? How did I manage to do it? Zhang Xian frowned slightly upon hearing such a question. I don't really know. I have never cultivated my soul depth before. It simply grew naturally. Hearing those words, Sword Saint Xing's face flushed completely crimson, and he nearly spurted blood. Are you telling me that your soul depth grew to 29? 1 naturally? Seeing how traumatized her husband was, Sword Saint Meng could not help but burst into laughter. Of all people her husband could ask, he just had to ask their son. Was he not asking for a mental trauma? The first time that they reunited with their son in the Empire Alliance, their son had only been at Saint 8 Dan. However, within half a month, he was already an Aureate body realm consummation expert. To attempt to compete with a prodigy of such a caliber, was it not obvious that he was asking for it? Is there a problem with my soul depth? Zhang Xian asked. To be exact, calling it natural growth was not entirely accurate. However, it was true that he had never cultivated his soul depth before in order to raise it. The Golden Page, Acknowledgements of Celestial Master Teacher, Soul Tempering of a Mentor's Calligraphy, Sudden Bouts of Inspiration. Each and every time that he encountered one of these, his soul depth would increase by 1, 0 or even more. Given so, it was no wonder that his soul depth had risen to 29. 1 so quickly. There's nothing wrong at all. Sword Saint Xing replied with a stifled look on his face. While others ground themselves down to the bones, in order to raise their soul depth by just 0.1. This fellow was actually able to raise his soul depth to a level comparable to Yang Shi without even bothering to cultivate it. If other master teachers heard that, they would surely lose all motivation to cultivate. Having stayed quiet all this time, Wu Chen suddenly spoke up. You won't be able to reach ancient sage if you allow your soul depth to simply grow naturally. You need to temper it in order to make your state of mind more wholesome and resilient. Only then will you be able to advance further in your cultivation. Does soul depth play a role in pushing for a breakthrough to ancient sage? Zhang Xian frowned. Strangely enough, neither the 3 premier clans, nor the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, had any books relating to ancient sages. As such, he knew next to nothing about the realm. The crux to reaching ancient sage is to align one's heart and will together with the world, thus granting one greater control over the environment. If one's state of mind isn't sufficient to harness the strength of the world, one will be at risk of turning into an idiot or descending into lunacy. It's great that you are able to raise your soul depth quickly through natural means, but without undergoing any tempering, it will be nigh impossible for you to reach ancient sage. Wu Chen seemed to be really familiar with this matter. Then again, considering that he was a sempiternal realm cultivator just like Yang Shi, it was likely that he had been seeking a way to push for a breakthrough to ancient sage all this while. It would not be surprising for him to be well versed in such knowledge. I see. Zhang Xian nodded. He had an otherworldly demon ancient sage corpse in his storage ring. While he had no idea how far he was away from ancient sage, he could roughly fathom how powerful ancient sages were. Even after the ancient sage's death, the other party's body remained so heavy that he had difficulty trying to lift it up. At the same time, the imposing aura that the other party emanated made it difficult for his primordial spirit to approach initially. These facts served as glimpses into how powerful ancient sage cultivators truly were. Even though it was just a realm of difference between sempiternal realm and ancient sage, this fine line demarcated the difference between a mortal and a deity. Naturally, the prowess of the two could not even begin to compare to one another. Zhang Xian thought that the difference lay in the accumulation of power. But who would have thought that soul depth actually played an important role as well? That's not right. A doubt swiftly arose in Zhang Xian's mind, and he quickly posed it to Wu Chen. The advancement of soul depth is a requirement imposed only on master teachers, right? Given so, it's unlikely for other cultivators to cultivate their soul depth. Since that's the case, how can they achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage? Soul depth was a requirement for the rank advancement of master teachers, which was the reason master teachers emphasized it so heavily. Other cultivators would not feel any need to cultivate their soul depth. And if so, would they not be unable to reach ancient sage? Ordinary cultivators do place great importance on cultivating their state of mind. Take apothecaries for example. If they weren't in the right state of mind, the tranquil heart pill they forged would be warped, thus transforming from a calming pill into lethal poison. Wu Chen explained. The same goes for other occupations. If demonic tunists fail to cultivate their state of mind, how could they possibly conceptualize their intent through music to beguile their opponents? If formation masters neglect their state of mind, how would they be able to set up highly complex formations? Hearing those words, Zhang Xian fell silent. He had faced something similar to this back when he was undergoing his one-dan apothecary examination. Back then, there was an apothecary who had not reached heart of tranquil water, and thus lacked control over his emotions. He had attempted to forge tranquil heart pills, while his mind was not in a composed state, and the pills that he produced eventually turned out to be lethal poison that could kill the cultivators, who unfortunately consumed them. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. He could relate to how state of mind was important to a demonic tunist too. If he could not control his emotions, his music would only run amok. For example, during his demonic tunist examination at the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, he had needed to make the divine cranes dance along with his zither melody. However, If he had allowed his emotions to run wild, it was likely that he would have jolted them to death with his music instead. Thinking about that, there were indeed no occupations in the world that demanded nothing of one's state of mind. It was just that none of them were as demanding as the master-teacher occupation. Before Kong Shi's era, the cultivation of soul depth was categorized under will of mind, and it was divided into many different levels. This is also where heart of tranquil water, lucid mind, unperturbed spirit, impervious will, impregnable heart, uninhibited psyche, incorruptible soul, and the like come from. Wuxia continued on. However, Kong Shi felt that such categorization is overly complex and hard to accurately gauge. Thus, he simplified the entire model through quantifying it with numbers, which gave rise to the soul depth that we are familiar with. The model has been adopted by the Master-Teacher Pavilion, with every 3.0 points indicating a new tier. 1-star Master Teachers require a soul depth of 3.0. 2-star Master Teachers require a soul depth of 6.0 and so on. Going by this, 9-star Master Teachers require a soul depth of 27.0. The requirement on soul depth is much harsher than cultivation. Those who haven't reached the required soul depth cannot be promoted, even under exceptional circumstances. Zhang Xian nodded in realization. Kong Shi had simplified the will of mind model into the soul depth model, and the Master Teacher Pavilion had adopted the latter as one of its promotion criteria. On the other hand, the other occupations still persisted in using the will of mind model, which worked fine as well since they did not require such a fine distinction. Of course, just because the other occupations did not adopt the soul depth model, did not mean that they would not temper their state of mind. While both models worked fine, there were still some advantages to quantifying state of mind in the form of soul depth. It would allow master teachers to constantly track their progress in cultivating their states of mind, thus encouraging them to adopt practices beneficial to advancing their soul depth. It was due to this that the Master Teacher Pavilion had become the leading expert in this field, and the other occupations struggled to catch up. I have been here once before, and if I recall correctly, there's a place just ahead that allows one to temper one's soul depth. It's known as the Heart Pavilion. There are cultivation techniques in there that allow one to reinforce one's state of mind, insights left behind by countless experts, and formations that temper one's state of mind. Why don't we head there to take a look? Since you have never tempered your state of mind before, you might be able to make considerable advancements through it. Sword Saint Xing suddenly suggested. Heart Pavilion. Zhang Xian nodded. Let's head there to take a look. Since the Temple of Confucius had not opened yet, he had some time to spare. Given that the Heart Pavilion could help him temper his state of mind, there was no harm heading over to take a look. All along, he had been dependent on fortuitous encounters in order to raise his soul depth. However, it would not do for him to be solely reliant on luck in tempering his state of mind. It would be great if he could acquire a feasible cultivation technique that would allow him to raise his soul depth. After walking for a while, a building came into sight. Walking in, they were greeted by a middle-aged man. Greetings. Do you intend to temper your state of mind or examine it? We wish to temper our state of mind, Zhang Xian replied. This way, please. The middle-aged man gestured with a smile. First and foremost, our Heart Pavilion doesn't accept spirit stones and other currencies. We only accept Saint Pinnacle artifacts as payment. Every 2 hours inside will cost a Saint Pinnacle artifact. It sure is expensive. Zhang Xian was slightly taken aback by the price. After all the scavenging that he had done, he had no lack of Saint Pinnacle artifacts in his inventory. Nevertheless, it was still a price that most cultivators would struggle to fork out, including those from major clans. Most Saint Nine Dan cultivators would not even have a Saint Pinnacle artifact, and yet, 2 hours in the Heart Pavilion would cost one such item. It can't be helped. It's extremely expensive to construct a formation in space that is safe yet challenging enough to temper one's state of mind. And maintaining it also costs a hefty sum, the middle-aged man replied. That's true, I suppose. Zhang Xian nodded. Most of the cultivators who had come to Tsiufu to temper their state of mind were 9-star master teachers, individuals who possessed soul depths of 27.0 and above. At their level, ordinary illusory formations and beguilement formations were already ineffective on them. In order to exert pressure on them, the highest quality formations and artifacts had to be used. Given so, it was inevitable for the cost to be on the pricier side. Here you go. Zhang Xian tossed over a Saint Pinnacle weapon. I would like to test the effects out for myself first. If it's effective, let's go in and cultivate together. Having plundered the military resources of 110,000 otherworldly demons, there were more than 1,000 Saint Pinnacle artifacts in his storage ring. Considering that he had no use for artifacts of that tier anymore, he had no issues spending them there. The crowd nodded in response. This way, please. The middle-aged man swiftly led them into a vast hall. Placed at the very center of the hall was a crystal ball. It revolved quietly above a stone platform, emanating a mesmerizing glow. The walls around the hall were inscribed with insights and cultivation techniques that would raise one's soul depth. These are left behind by the experts who have been to the Heart Pavilion to temper their state of mind. We have tested them personally, and they are all highly effective in raising one's soul depth. However, please do take caution when reading through them. If you attempt to take in too much, they could end up hindering your state of mind instead. Use them prudently, and your soul depth will surely surge ahead, the middle-aged man said with a smile. Cultivation techniques were valued not in quantity but quality. Attempting to take in too much would only end up confusing one instead. Every cultivator had their own path of cultivation to follow. The more they attempted to emulate the route of others, the further they would stray from their path. If a cultivator lost themselves in the wisdom of others, not only would their growth slow down, their cultivation might even go berserk. It was for this reason that the Master Teacher Pavilion discouraged individuals from studying too many cultivation techniques. Of course, there were pros and cons to the matter. If a cultivator successfully utilized the wisdom of others to further their own path, they would be able to reach a height far beyond their predecessors. When you are ready, just place your hand on the crystal ball ahead and focus your attention on your consciousness. The crystal ball will process the fluctuations in your state of mind. If you reach the limits of your tolerance at any point in time, will immediately terminate the formation so that you are not hurt. The middle-aged man explained. I understand. Zhang Xian nodded. He took 2 steps up to the crystal ball, but he did not rush to place his hand on it. Instead, he swept his gaze across the wall opposite of him. Find authorized novels in Webnovel Faster Updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Ooh. A new book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. Placing his finger on the book, its content swiftly flowed into Zhang Xian's mind. Slowly, his eyes lit up in excitement. By compiling all of the cultivation techniques and insights detailed on the wall together, he had successfully compiled a Heaven's Path heart-tempering art. While he had encountered numerous books relating to the tempering of one's state of mind in the past, he had never paid much attention to it. However, as he browsed through the content of the Heaven's Path heart-tempering art, he swiftly realized that raising one's soul depth was not easy. In terms of difficulty, it was much higher than raising one's cultivation, especially due to how elusive and intangible the entire field was. The typical method to temper one's state of mind in the master-teacher continent was using illusory formations to put one's consciousness through various turmoil. Through overcoming those ordeals, one's state of mind would gradually grow steadier and more resilient. However, this typical method was both passive and indirect. It relied heavily on luck and circumstances. Even if one augmented the process with heart-tempering cultivation techniques and artifacts, the rate of growth still would not be too remarkable. Fortunately, the Heaven's Path heart-tempering art that Zhang Xian had just compiled through the Library of Heaven's Path resolved this problem perfectly. It allowed him to cultivate his state of mind directly, just like his Jinqian soul. Let me begin. Zhang Xian quickly went through the heart-tempering cultivation technique in his mind before placing his hand on the crystal ball. Wang. A shimmer of light shrouded the crystal ball as numbers surfaced on it. 29. 1. Just as Zhang Xian had calculated, his soul depth had already reached a level equivalent to 9-star pinnacle master teachers. He's a 9-star master teacher? The middle-aged man recoiled in shock. He had thought that given how young Zhang Xian was, his soul depth would surely be the lowest among the group. Most likely, that was why he had gone there to temper his state of mind. Yet who would have thought? 29-1. Even if he looked at the whole of Xiufu, it was unlikely that there would be too many master teachers who could match him. Seeing the middle-aged man's shocked expression, Sword Saint Ming nodded proudly. Is there anyone who has encountered sudden bouts of inspiration while tempering their state of mind here? There is. Many years ago, Yang Shi visited our heart pavilion, and his soul depth was at 28. 2 when he first tested it. In the midst of tempering his state of mind, an epiphany suddenly struck him, and his soul depth shot up by 0. 2, reaching 28. 4. That matter has become a legend of our heart pavilion, the middle-aged man said. The difficulty in raising one's soul depth grew exponentially difficult the higher one's soul depth was. Beyond 27. 0 every increment of 0. One would usually require many years of hard work. It was indubitably a remarkable feat for Yang Shi to have advanced his soul depth by 0. 2 in less than 2 hours. Very few would be able to emulate his success. Yang Shi is indeed formidable. Do you have any rank board or the sort here? What is the fastest rate that a master teacher has raised his soul depth? Sword Saint Ming continued asking. We do have something similar to that. The current record holder for the fastest increment in soul depth is held by an 8-star master teacher. His soul depth was 24. 7 when he first arrived, and when he tested it 2 hours later, it had already reached 25. 7. That was an increment of a whole 1. 0. But of course, it's hard to compare this with Yang Shi's feat after all. The higher one's soul depth is, the more difficult it is to raise it. The middle-aged man said. Raising one's soul depth was similar to building a narrow tower. The bottom layer was always easier to build, but after reaching a certain height, the difficulty would suddenly skyrocket. Dear, are you thinking that our Xin'er will be able to break the record? Sword Saint Xing asked. It was not too difficult for him to follow his wife's train of thought. My son is a prodigy. Isn't it normal for him to break records? Sword Saint Ming replied matter-of-factly. I think you have too much confidence in our son. Tempering one's soul depth is different from raising one's cultivation. There's no way to force the matter. Sword Saint Xing shook his head. Raising one's soul depth was not as easy as taking in spiritual energy and converting it into one's strength. It was a far more complicated process, and it was highly dependent on luck. Even though his son was a prodigy, there were some things in life that talent simply could not influence. Look over there. Before Sword Saint Xing could finish his words, a shrill voice sounded. Sword Saint Xing immediately turned his gaze over, and on the crystal ball, he saw the number 29. 1 foot flickering and turning into 29. 2 foot 29. 3 foot 29. 4 foot. This. Sword Saint Xing was flabbergasted. Not only was Sword Saint Xing stupefied by what he was seeing, even the middle-aged man was standing petrified on the spot. It looked as if he had just seen a ghost. Complete silence loomed in the air. It was just a moment ago that they had been praising Yang Shi for raising his soul depth by 0. 2 so swiftly, but that was the result of a sudden epiphany, and it had taken him 2 whole hours in order to do so. On the other hand, to jump up by 0. 1 every 10 seconds, how in the world was the young man doing it? Even 1-star master teachers with soul depths of 3. 0 would not be able to do it so swiftly. Could the crystal ball be spoiled? The middle-aged man muttered as he hurried forward to check on the artifact. However, the crystal ball was completely intact. There was not the slightest trace of damage that could be seen on it. If the crystal ball was not faulty, it meant that the changes had come from the young man himself. But was such a matter humanly possible? Wu Chen's eyebrows danced frenziedly around the place, and he looked as if he was about to lose his mind. This was not cultivation but soul depth that they were talking about, and the other party's soul depth was beyond 29. 0 at that. To be increasing 0. 1 every 10 seconds. He has a strong foundation for his state of mind, having cultivated every realm of his will of mind impeccably. This has made his state of mind incomparably wholesome. As a result, he faces little impediment in the advancement of his soul depth, thus allowing him to raise it swiftly. Luo Ruoxin placed her hands behind her back, as she calmly explained the situation. There was not the slightest hint of surprise on her face, as if she had expected such a matter to happen. As a celestial master teacher, Zhang Xian had a strong foundation for his state of mind. Using the tower analogy once more, if the lower blocks were laid impeccably, it would be much easier to build the top layers. Strong foundation. Coming to realize what was going on, bitter smiles appeared on the faces of the crowd. This was especially so for Sword Saint Xing. He was so embarrassed that he could have found a hole to bury himself in. He had been thinking that his son's state of mind would be lagging behind, due to him advancing his cultivation too quickly. However, this matter had told him loud and clear that his son's cultivation was not fast at all. On the contrary, his cultivation was having difficulty keeping up with his state of mind. Since he had already met the necessary requirements to push for a breakthrough in his cultivation, what was the point of him remaining stationary on the spot? Before everyone's shocked gazes, the number on the crystal ball finally came to a halt. 29, 9. Exhaling deeply, Zhang Xian retracted his palm from the crystal ball and shook his head. This seems to be my limit. Cultivating the Heaven's Path heart-tempering art, he had indeed been able to advance his soul depth swiftly at the start. However, as soon as it struck 29, 9, he realized that he was unable to raise his soul depth any higher. It was as if there was a massive barrier standing ahead of him, obstructing his path forward. No matter how hard he tried to push through it, the barrier simply would not falter. He swiftly realized that it was impossible for him to break the barrier with his current strength. Watching as Zhang Xian walked back in his direction, the middle-aged man's eyes were widened as though large bells. Just like that, you are already done cultivating. Normal cultivators would find even 10 hours too short for their cultivation, but this fellow had actually reached his bottleneck within just 2 minutes. I just paid for 2 hours straight, so we should still have some time left. Do any of you want to give it a try? Zhang Xian asked as he turned to the crowd. I'll give it a try, Sword Saint Meng said. She still had a gleeful smile on her face, overjoyed by her son's incredible feat. Give me a moment. I had an epiphany after browsing through the cultivation techniques inscribed on the walls, so I created one of my own. Allow me to impart it to you. Zhang Xian said. You created a new cultivation technique? Even Sword Saint Meng could not help but be startled by what she had just heard. It hasn't even been 3 minutes from the moment we entered the room till now. But not only have you raised your soul depth by 0.8, you even managed to create a cultivation technique? Indeed. Zhang Xian nodded, not bothering to explain the matter any further. With a tap of his finger, a sliver of his will dived into Sword Saint Meng's consciousness. Swiftly going through the knowledge that had just been imprinted into her mind, Sword Saint Meng's body stiffened in shock. As an intuitive impulse realm expert, she had her own heart-tempering cultivation technique to reinforce her state of mind. However, when she looked at the heart-tempering cultivation technique that her son had sent over, she realized that what she had cultivated previously was no different from trash. She quickly internalized the heart-tempering cultivation technique that she had just received, and it did not take long for her to fully grasp it. Let me give it a try. Taking a deep breath, Sword Saint Meng walked up to the crystal ball and placed her palm on it. Wang. Numbers surfaced on the crystal ball. 27. 3. She was a powerful cultivator, and her swordsmanship was nothing short of impressive. However, her soul depth had stagnated shortly after she reached the mark required to become a 9-star master teacher. Feeling the pressure coming from the crystal ball, Sword Saint Meng closed her eyes and began to drive the heart-tempering cultivation technique that
according
her son
to the
had
legends,
imparted to her.
Kong Shi had possessed the ability
numbers
to
on the
understand
crystal ball
anything that he laid his eyes
27.
upon and master any craft in a moment's time. That was actually similar to what his son was able to do. Was his son really going to reach a level comparable to Kong Shi? Just the thought of it filled him with anticipation for the future. Come over. I have already reached my bottleneck, and I don't think I can go any further than this. While Sword Saint Xing was still deep in thought, his wife spoke. He quickly turned his gaze over and saw the number 29. 9 foot on the crystal ball. Within such a short period of time, his wife's soul depth had actually increased by 2.6, reaching 29. 9, the very limits of a 9-star master teacher. 29. 9 is the limit of a great sage. If you take another step forward, it will mean that your soul depth has reached a level comparable to ancient sages. Wu Chen explained. Achieving a breakthrough from 29. 9 means that my soul depth has reached a level comparable to ancient sages? Zhang Xian fell into deep thought. I'm unable to advance my Jinqi or soul cultivation any further at the moment, but I do have a golden page on hand. If I use it, will I be able to raise my soul depth by another 5.0, thus reaching a level comparable to ancient sages? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.